In this video, I'm going to be going over the 2016 Regents in Living Environment. That's right, every single question I'm going to explain, and hopefully you can see the links below in the description area to click on the question you want. Many different ways to use this video. The best way I think is to sit and take the entire test. You know where to download this. Search for Living Environment Exams online. You can find this exact test also with its answers, but I would definitely take it cold, sit down, do every single question the best you can, and then review every single answer you either get wrong or answer by guessing correctly. Okay, so let's be crazy and start in order with number one. Number one, which statement is an example of interdependence of organisms? That's important, party people. That's important, this interdependence. You have to understand what that means. That's a really important vocab word here. So interdependence means that you have two organisms, A and B, and because they're interdependent, both of them require each of them to survive. Okay, so they both are going to benefit. So the fact that we have this word organisms, we need two living organisms. Number one, owls hunt at night. Owls, or in this choice, you only have one organism, so we get rid of that. And it's a really good test-taking thing, or strategy, I should say, to get rid of the choices make no sense. Let's look at number three, kind of giving away the answer here. Ticks feed on the blood of animals, and the ticks grow larger. If you notice, the ticks are going to benefit from the blood of other animals. And now if you notice, we're mentioning two different organisms, so this would be a good distractor. This is what they do. They build and make questions so that you would pick them. So you see, oh, I see two different organisms, so it must be right. But wait a minute, how does the other animal that's giving the blood to the ticks benefit? Ticks, right? If the ticks are A, they're getting resources and nutrition from B. But what does the other animal get? In fact, we know ticks give diseases. This can't be correct. The other animal who's giving the blood must benefit, and it does not. Look at choice 4. Crows, that's the big blackbirds, okay, that go caw, okay, feed on dead mice. Well, how do the dead mice benefit? For the same reason, 3 and 4 make no sense. Look at choice 2, which is the answer, okay? No, choice 2, ants get food from insects, okay? So that means what? All right, the ants are going to benefit. There's an arrow going toward A, so if I do it this way, the ants get nutrition, okay, and then what? And protect insects, all right, from predators. So they get food from the insects and protect the insects from the predators. So essentially, the ants get something and they also give something to others, and that's protection from predators. So the ants and the insects both benefit. This arrow's going both ways. Ants get food and the insects get protection. So that's why 2 is the answer, and that's what this interdependence means. And it's an important concept that you understand that organisms are not living things that live by themselves. They are required and tied to other organisms. The best way to think about this is we have the sun, who gives energy directly to plants. Plants, we should know, are these autotrophs, and of course all the energy in the earth, okay, has to be distributed from the plants to the consumers, the heterotrophs, right? If we lose the sun, we lose the plants, and of course we lose all of our energy, and we ourselves die as humans because we're up the food chain. Important. So 1 is 2. Number 2. Okay, number 2, residents of a town are concerned that a recently built factory could pose health risks. Really good strategy here is to underline important words. Scientists were asked to investigate the effects of the factory. So they're asking scientists to investigate the effects. So scientists is going to use, of course, the scientific model. They're going to gather data, okay, and come up with a conclusion based upon that data of the factory. Okay, so they want to investigate the effects of the factory on health of local residents. They're looking at the health and how it affects the local residents based upon this factory. We know factories, of course, okay, can pollute the environment. Okay, so the idea that you have factories giving off pollution or chemicals, okay, can harm possibly us and other organisms living in the environment. So what would be the best? Now look at the question, and this is important. The most relevant information for scientists investigating the effects. So they're looking for a choice, okay, that's going to help us figure out if, in fact, the factories are harming others the best. So look at choice one. In a survey, residents felt that their air in a town looks dirtier. Well, feeling about something and taking a survey to see how people feel about something is not going to give the most relevant information. We need hard data, data that's collected about people getting hurt or not getting hurt, and how people feel, though very nice, is not the best relevant information. Cross it out. Two, there have been reports that other types of factories have been linked. Now, that's a good distractor. That's a possibility. There have been other reports, okay? Now, we got to look at those reports. We don't know if those reports are, guess what, possible surveys that are about feelings. So I'm not really sure. That could be a possibility. Three, residents have occasionally seen smoke coming from the factory. So you think that scientists will take into account that people see smoke come from the factory? Most factories give off smoke. So seeing smoke enough, I don't know if that's the most relevant information. So again, I need some facts here. Look at choice four. Local medical facilities, that would probably be hospitals, have recently reported a 50% increase in the number of patients treated for asthma. All of a sudden, there's an increase with people who have trouble breathing. Remember, asthma, okay, is a condition, all right, where we have the closing of the bronchial tubes in your lungs, the air passages, based to a couple different conditions, mostly because they think there is an antigen or something that they're maybe allergic to or something foreign. But the bottom line is trouble breathing, and a 15% increase. That's hard data. So 4 is the best answer. Scientists want to gather data and take information. None of these choices here have information other than what people feel and possibly what other reports are. So the most relevant information, okay, about the current new factory is that in the current condition or in a same area, someone has reported there's more people getting sick. So choice 4 is best. Now choice 2 is a good wrong answer, okay, but it's not specific enough and doesn't have the data enough to answer to the best. So number 2 is 4, on to number 3. Okay, number 3, farmers may someday clone, and that's an important word here, their best milk producing cow in a whole herd. So that means that they have a bunch of cows and one of them really produces a lot of milk. So you want to what? Maximize what you have. So let's take that best milk producing cow and make more of them so we have a lot of them. What potential disadvantage? That's important, party people. What are they looking for? Disadvantage. Might be important to consider in having such a large group of clones on one farm. So idea, what is a clone? You've got to know this. A clone is an exact copy or an exact replica, which means that other organism has the exact DNA of the other individual that you copied. So a clone would be you took a cell of a cow that was the best milk producer and you made another cow with exactly its same DNA, okay? All of its proteins are exactly the same, all of the genes, so it's an exact copy. Okay, so let's go to the choices, and we're looking for a disadvantage. Okay, so what would be a disadvantage of having a clone, an exact copy, an exact DNA replica, okay, of one cow? All right, so number 1, it may be difficult to tell animals apart. Okay, but why would you care if they're all the same producing great milk? So 1 makes no sense. 2, lack of variation may limit survival in the herd. I'm liking this. This is an early winner for me, and this is what I'm doing strategy-wise. I'm trying to find what's sticking out. I like this one. You should know that diversity, anytime you have genetic diversity in a population, there's a greater chance of them survival. I'll explain that better in a second if this is the winner, and I think it is. 3, the cows could be fertilized only by one type of bull. Well, if they're all the exact DNA, remember, cows that give off milk are females, right? Right? Females have mammary glands, okay? So they are females. So yeah, if they're all the same and they're all the same species, this would be an advantage that you only need one type of bull to fertilize all of them. So this is not a disadvantage. Remember what we're looking for. That's why it's good to circle. So 3, we get rid of it. That's an advantage, okay? 4, the cows could be mated only with each other. Huh? Wait a minute. If they're females, remember female cows are the ones that give off milk. Can you mate a female with a female? Okay, you cannot. Okay, to have sexual reproduction, you have to have a male and female. So 4 makes no sense. So it leaves me with the winner, clear winner, lack of variation. Why is it a lack? Usually in a population, because we have different individuals and we have what? In sexual reproduction, you have this crossover that occurs in chromosomes. We have what we call recombinations. So even our the daughters and sons, okay, of the mothers aren't exactly alike. We have a lot of genetic variation in the daughters and sons that basically reproduce from meiosis here to separate them. Okay, so the point is lack of variation is important because remember the survival of a species depends upon having a lot of different what we call alleles, expressions. Now think about humans for a second. Okay, you may say, well, how does that work? Well, we know that in humans there's so many different types of alleles. Alleles are expressed genes like blue hair, blonde hair, freckles on the skin. And you may say, well, that's all fun and dandy, but why is that important? Well, in the wild, and of course humans aren't really in the wild anymore, but maybe the environment changes in the future, and all of a sudden, one type of person with a type of skin or color eyes survives better than others, and all of a sudden, that type of individual gets to what? Reproduce, and all of a sudden, that type of individual with a certain allele gets to survive and reproduce them, and they, of course, survive the environmental change. So you should know that natural selection or evolution is based upon variation. And if you have a lot of different individuals that have different types of DNA, if there's a change in the environment, okay, the survival of the population can continue because a few of them will survive because they have the right expressed alleles to do that. Very important. Okay, anytime you see variation, anytime you see genetic variation, okay, that's usually going to be your winner. Number 3 is 2. On to number 4. Okay, DNA replication occurs in preparation for what? Now, when we're replicating DNA, what we're replicating is mostly the chromosomes. We know that everyone has a pair of chromosomes, one from your mother, one from your father. Okay, and for humans, we have 23 pairs for a total of 46. That means we have 23 pairs. That means these are called homologous chromosomes. That means they could hold a hair color here. Okay, and you can have your mother's hair color and your dad's, and you get one or the other. But important, okay, in preparation of mitosis and meiosis, remember mitosis is an exact copy, okay, which means I want to make another what? Daughter cell from, and I make 2 daughter cells that have what? 2 copies. Think about that. Let's pretend an organism has only 1 pair. To make an exact copy, which is mitosis, how do I make 4? Well, it has to duplicate, okay? Or we say replicate. Replication is like duplication. Again, another word you have to get down. Replication, duplication. So in order, if this individual that I have has 2, all right, how does it now have 4? Remember, mitosis, you take 1 cell and it divides and makes an exact copy. This is not cloning, okay? But cloning does have mitosis involved, okay? So you can think of cloning using mitosis, but the cloning is in fact all the cells. Again, there's a connection, but we're talking here is in mitosis exact copy. So how do I go from 2 to 4? They have to duplicate. Now what's meiosis? Meiosis, if we have an individual with 2, is going to produce 4 gametes. You should know this. Now, gametes means they only have the half number called the haploid. So one cell, this could be in spermagenesis or oogenesis. Remember, spermagenesis is where we make sperms, that's half, and oogenesis make the egg. So what we have here is we make 4 individual haploid cells. This is diploid. Now look carefully. Okay, why do we want to make haploid cells? Because we want this sperm cell to mate with another what? Egg cell that has 1, and when they come together and fertilize, they'll make 2. Bottom line, party people, is that in spermagenesis or meiosis, you're going to produce 4 what? Individuals, or I would say gametes, I should say, half the number, but count 1, 2, 3, 4. We start with 2 and we end up with 4. So we're going to have replication in mitosis, which is the exact copy, and we're going to have the replication in meiosis to prepare to make these sperm and egg cells that can fertilize. Remember, to fertilize each other, you want to make the exact pair. If the individual has two, when these guys come together, a sperm and an egg, you want them to have two again. All right, so you had to understand that in meiosis, we make four here. So both mitosis and meiosis, okay, produce, okay, have to replicate their DNA or duplicate their DNA before they either make an exact copy, like in cloning, or making four cells that have half the number. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Remember, my model I was using 2. So number 4 is 3. Okay, on to number 5. Okay, number 5, an individual eats a hamburger. Which two systems must interact to transfer the nutrients in the hamburger to the human muscle system? What are they looking for? They're eating food. Which two systems, okay, must interact? And here's the important word: transfer the nutrients of the hamburger to the muscle tissue. So if we eat food, okay, that food must be what? Digested. Now, what does that mean? Digested means that that food must be broken down, okay, and somehow getting into our bloodstream. And the system that breaks the food down that goes into our bloodstream is the digestive system. Okay, so 2 and 3 are choices. And then once it's in our blood, it's got to be transported to our muscle cells. And what system transports it? And that would, of course, who is the blood, of the blood transports it, and that's the circulatory system. So the digestive and circulatory system. I know some people say, well, wait a minute, trying to get energy. Why isn't it not the respiratory system? Because not only do you have food, you need oxygen for cellular respiration. True, but they just want to transfer the nutrients from the hamburger to the muscle. So it just must be the digested food that uses digestive system here. And then, of course, the circulatory system that transports. It's all in about just to transfer. But in order to transfer the food, you got to digest it. 3 is the best choice for number 5. On to number 6. So number 6 here. The diagram below shows a cell completing a life process. And what is this? Well, this is essentially a cell, hey, engulfing some possible food into a vacuole and going to digest it for nutrients. This looks like possibly amoeba doing phagocytosis, okay? But if you didn't know all those words, bottom line is I see one cell taking something in. So it looks like it's taking and it's getting some nutrition. Now, important, there's only one cell here. So let's go to the question. Cell A performs functions similar to the tissues and systems in complex multicellular organisms. That's a great statement, but let's wait for the question. This process, okay, that we see here results in what? Okay, you could be totally lost here. Sometimes the choices you can eliminate here. Look at 1, increased genetic variation. When we increase the genetic variation, it's really important you understand we're dealing with the nucleus. And there's nothing happening with this nucleus here. We're not dividing into what? New cells. We're not copying the DNA. We're not mutating and changing this way. We're not undergoing sexual reproduction where we're going to take one chromosome from each other here. So this idea of increased genetic variation is not happening because we're not dealing with anything with the nucleus, whether it's reproduction or mutating the genes or so forth. So this is one we're going to cross off. You've got to understand that we're dealing with nucleus, okay, where the hereditary information is found, and that's not what this is about. Okay, let's go to 3, a reduction in competition. Well, competition is if you had more than one cell. You'd have to have at least 2 cells doing what? Fighting for the same type of food. That's important. All right, they're in the same niche in an ecosystem, which means they're basically using the same resources. Okay, there's only one cell here. Notice the arrow, it's changing. So we have no competition because there's only one cell. You can't compete with yourself. I guess you can, but in the case of biology, you don't. You need another organism. Okay, increased autotrophic, and there's a word you have to know. Autotrophic, what does that mean? Auto. What's so auto about it is that if the sun is out, you can make nutrients. You can produce starch and glucose and sugar from the sun, and that's photosynthesis, right? You've got to know this. Okay, so photosynthesis is when we use something called like a chloroplast. Okay, it's a special organelle, okay, that with sun we create energy. Well, this guy's not doing that. This guy is taking in probably food from its environment. Okay, it's a heterotroph. So this makes no sense. You had to know that. So the best answer is maintaining homeostasis. And homeostasis just means the regular jobs or the regular functions of the cell that support it so that it can keep living. We know all living things require a constant supply of energy. So therefore, we eat or we ingest food, okay, in order to keep providing the ATP, which is that energy rich compound that helps us do every single life function. So in any case, 2 is the best answer. And again, you can eliminate your choices that don't make any sense. And hopefully you understand those differences now. On to number 7. Number 7, the shape of a protein directly determines, ooh, very important. This is everything in biology. If you could break down biology or living environment to one thing, I could make it down. You could break it down into proteins, okay? Now, proteins are so important because we have genes. These are basically codes of our 4 nucleotides that you learn, you know, A, T, G, C, these codes that are on 2 chromosomes, right? And we have a pair of chromosomes, and these genes code for a certain type of amino acids. The amino acids build the proteins, right? And these proteins, of course, okay, are the soldiers of our genetic life, in the sense that the genes code for the proteins. The proteins make the alleles. Now, the alleles are the expressed genes to make our eyes blue, our color of our hair, our skin, all of our characteristics. That's what an allele is. It's the expression of the gene. To make what the genes are code for, the proteins do. They catalyze the chemical reactions. They make the chemical reactions occur to make us express what is coded for in the nucleus. Now, how do they work? They work by their what? Their form. They have a special three-dimensional shape. And that three-dimensional shape is what makes substrates go into the actual chemicals that actually give us our expressed alleles. So it's form and function. Get it down. Form equals function. You change its three-dimensional form, you change its function. So it directly determines its function inside and outside the cells. Okay? Because the outside and inside the cells, it creates the chemical reaction. Outside the cells, those chemical reactions create the alleles that we see. There's just no better answer. Okay? So remember, look at choice 1, movements through the cytoplasm. Okay, the shape, okay, is all about its function. Movements through the cytoplasm, could be a good choice because we know that proteins can span the cytoplasm and allow things to go through. So it's not bad, but the best choice is 2. Roles in building water molecules, no. Circulation through the body. These are all possibilities maybe, but man, when you see form and function and three-dimensionality, that's your answer. Remember, you learn that proteins have a range, right, in pH or temperature. If you increase the temperature, which is movement, you can deform these proteins so they don't work anymore. You've learned about denaturing. So if you change its shape, it can't do its form. Another thing, guys, a mutation. If you have a mutation, which means possibly there's a wrong code here, okay, where you, let's say, have a one nucleotide that's wrong for many different reasons, it gives us variation. But if that nucleotide is wrong, it can code for the wrong amino acids that could make a protein that no longer has the same shape, and no longer do you get the alleles. So all of that's so important in what you learn this year. Form and function, proteins, they give us the alleles. They are the soldiers of our DNA to express what we're coded for in our nucleus to the entire organism. Okay, we need to make proteins of a particular shape. A mutation changes that shape and could make it a recessive, a broken gene. That broken gene, though, could do something new, and that's how evolution occurs. 7 is 2. You've got to get this down, form and function. Okay, any case, number 8. Number 8, the diagram below represents a cell and some molecules in its environment. This is the intracellular, inside the cell, and this is outside the cell. Okay, here's the question. Which molecule, and here are the keys for the types of molecules, would require the use of energy? There it is. There's the key, the word here, use of. You need energy to make this happen. What they're really saying is active transport. There's passive and there's active. Active requires energy. You've got to get this down. We're going against traffic. Let me explain. Okay, let's say you've gone to a concert or a baseball game, basketball game, a place where there's a lot of people. Okay, they're in a small area watching a game. Now, when the game is over, all these people do what? They leave this place to go to their parking lot and go home. And it's not that hard. There's a flow. Most people are going in this direction. And we would call this passive. Passive is diffusion, where you go from what? High concentration to low concentration. And that requires no energy. In fact, if you think about this for a second, if there's so many individuals, okay, moving in one direction, they can almost pick you up and take you because everyone's going in one direction, so they can actually push you this way and you don't have to provide any energy. But wait a minute, what if you're an individual that left with the crowd passively, but then realized you left your wallet or your jacket in your seat, and now you have to do what? Go backwards against all the people who are leaving. You've got to fight through this what? This crowd going outward, and you're going from low concentration to high. You would need energy. And to go against the grain, go against the flow of traffic, you have to provide energy. People are hitting you going this way. So this would be active transport. This is where you would need the energy. So in the cell, it's no different. We're looking for something that's going from what? Low concentration to high. Well, let's look at the choices. Let's look at molecules square. You have 1, 2, 3 of these squares. And out here you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hey, there's a lot more squares on the outside than inside. So how is that going to flow? Always high to low. That's going to be passive. Okay, there's a lot more people on the outside than inside, so they're going to flow this way. So we're going to cross out 1. Let's look at the diamonds. Okay, we've got 1. I can do my 2. I think there's 3. And there's 1 and 2 inside. For the same reason, there's more diamonds on the outside, so they're going to passively follow the crowd. So we get rid of them. Triangles, count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 on the outside, and guess what? 1 on the inside. It's still passive. You don't need energy. We're going to flow from high to low. So the triangles go in without any energy. Which one is different? Look at the circles on the outside. 1, 2, 3, 4. Look at the inside. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There is more on the inside than outside. So these guys are going against the grain because the ones inside, because there's more of them, should be really coming out passively to go against the grain, to go from low, there's only 4 outside, to the inside where there's more. You need energy. So it's why it's choice 4. It's the only one that's different if you have to use that. Remember, active transport means that you need energy to go against the grain. What's the grain? Going against the flow of traffic from high to low. You're going from low to high. So the circle is the only one there that's going against the traffic going out. Because there's more circles inside, it's got to fight through them coming out. So I hope you get the difference there. You need energy to go from low to high. If you've got a lot already, like the first 3 molecules, it's going to leave because diffusion, okay, which is the movement of materials from high concentration, low concentration through a semi-permeable membrane, that's your cell membrane here, happens without adding energy. And that's a good thing. We have a lot more oxygen in our blood, and it has to get to our cells that way. So number 8 is 4. On to number 9. Number 9, many domestic plants, that just means plants that we use currently, that we grow and control, are currently used by food for humans, share a wild plant ancestor. That means that all of these types of modern plants, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, and cabbage, all came from wild mustard, okay? Somehow they changed. The changes that have occurred in 4 common plants are shown in the table below. Okay, great. All of these modern plants came from wild mustard. How in the world did that happen? What event most likely produced the changes that occurred? Now, party people, listen, these different what? Plants, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, are all different than wild mustard. That means they have what? They have different alleles. What's an allele? That means they have different expressed genes, right? Their genes changed. The code in DNA, which we all know is the A, T, C, G on a long chain, must have changed. When it changes, okay, it changes the allele. And what changed the code? We have to know that that's a mutation. A mutation is for some reason, and it could be just by chance, it happens over a long period of time, okay, this code change. What should be a C is now an A. And all of a sudden, the protein, and that's important, the protein that it codes for is different, and that different protein has a different shape that catalyzes a different allele there, okay? So it's about mutations. Okay, all the new alleles. Hey, we all came from a single cell. Okay, our humans, as advanced as we are, came from a single cell. Okay, how'd that happen? Over time, okay, mutations occurred. So mutations, okay, create the different alleles over time. It's the a formula for change to other organisms. So one is the answer. Okay, you've got to know that. And 2, humans did not like to eat wild mustard. That doesn't make any sense. The preference for wild mustard, it could have been something that maybe killed off humans, maybe, but no, 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 no. 3, competition for survival. We're not talking about multiple organisms, so competition's showing up as choices. Ancient herbivores overgrazed wild mustard. If they overgrazed wild mustard, they would kill off wild mustard, and if there's no wild mustard, then the rest of these organisms would not come from. Because if you look at a what? A cladogram or some kind of phylogenetic tree of all of these individuals, and this could be broccoli, cauliflower, whatever, but this is wild mustard. This is the what? Ancient organism. If it died off, then the rest of these organisms would not have resulted. Okay, so the changes of new alleles, the new alleles that become present in our population, okay, are due to mutations. Oftentimes they're dangerous, but they're oftentimes very good. They allow us to have that genetic diversity, okay, that give us the opportunities to survive in the future. Okay, so any case, the changing of alleles, mutations, you've learned about that. And those mutations occur because we could be inserting a new, what, nucleotide, we could be deleting, or we can have a change of them, okay? An independent single nucleotide change there. It doesn't matter, but you've got to know the changes in our genes change the alleles. And these are different alleles. Broccoli do what? Have different flowers, different leaves. Okay? Number 9 is 1. On to number 10. Number 10, a strand of DNA in a skin cell contains the bases. Here they are. After the cell is exposed to ultraviolet light, which by the way is called a mutagen, okay? A mutagen is nothing more than an outside chemical or exposure or environmental factor that changes and mutates our DNA. And a mutation is a change of this code. This code is on our DNA. So after the cell has been exposed to ultraviolet light, which we know is a mutagen because too much of it can cause skin cancer, the strand contains these bases. Here's the question: which statement describes the result of this exposure? Okay, 1, a new base has been inserted. Now, if there's a new base that's inserted, which would cause a frame shift mutation, this thing should be longer. This nucleotide chain should be longer. And if you notice, it is if you do by the eye. Here's the A, here's the T, here's the G. Now, there's the change. C to G is different right there. Okay, but notice something. This is CCATCGG. This little fragment right here is the same fragment right here. So what's the difference? The difference is that this G was inserted. Okay, so this is insertion. This is a mutation that inserted a new nucleotide. And this is actually very disastrous because if you remember, a three nucleotides in a row called a triplet codon codes for a protein. And codes for an amino acid that builds the proteins. So if you notice, it's going to change their reading frame and it's going to be disastrous. But the bottom line is all you had to know was a new base has been inserted. If it was deleted, this would be shortened, but this is elongated if you count. So no good. One base has been substituted for another. That would be another type of mutation, but they'd be the same number. And so we definitely can see from what I showed you here that it was definitely adding one. And of course, there definitely have been changes, so 4 makes no sense. So number 10 is 1. On to number 11. In number 11, an amoeba. I think that's misspelled, but then who am I to say? I think I might have misspelled proteins earlier back, but who cares? A one-celled organism can move, ingest, transport materials. Notice these are a couple of different things it can do because it has what? Well, it's a single, important, it's a one-celled organism. One-celled organisms do not have tissues. Tissues are a what? This is important. Group of similar cells. Group of similar cells that do a similar function. Group of cells, okay, that perform the same task or the similar. Okay, so group of cells that are similar. And because it's only a what? One cell, this makes no sense. A system is what? A group of what? Tissues that are doing a particular job. Okay, like the digestive system. Actually, sorry, a group of organs. My bad, a group of organs. So the digestive system is using a group of organs like the small intestine, large intestine, the pancreas, doing a particular large job. So that's not good. Okay, organs are a group of tissues, and you must know these definitions. Group of what? Group of tissues, not a box of tissues that you might need after this test. You should not keep going. Group of tissues, okay, that are doing the same thing. So it's, hey, single cells have organelles. And the reason why I say organelles, they act like organs, but they're so small, obviously they're not a group. They're not multicellular. So organelles, and if you good, a good examples of is the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. The another good organelle, okay, would be the endoplasmic reticulum. Okay, that's where you flow the information to make proteins. So organelles, okay, are these small specialized regions inside the cell. They're specialized, and what makes eukaryotes special is you have these organelles. If you're a prokaryote, remember, you don't have cell membranes. So organelles are the small little specialized functions inside a cell. Okay? All right. Number 11 is 2. On to number 12. Number 12. In humans, the placenta is essential for the embryo. Now remember, the placenta is those group of cells that develop on the uterus wall, okay, that actually come from the baby, it's developing fetus itself, it's okay, and allow by diffusion nutrients to go from the mother to the baby and from the baby back to the mother's blood. Blood does not mix through the placenta. So it's a way for things to diffuse from high to low. And the baby, of course, requires nutrition. It has to excrete its waste, but the baby's not going to reproduce. So one doesn't make any sense. Okay. Is it essential for nutrition, excretion? Sure. How about respiration? Doesn't the baby require oxygen? Absolutely. That's why 2 is the answer. Okay. Look at number 3. Movement. Does it require the placenta for movement? No, the baby is going to kick and move using its own muscles, even though it probably does so to help with its own circulation. So it's not going to help with movement. That's why I get rid of 3. And coordination. Well, that's something that the baby's brain will help. Its movement, its own muscles, and its own growth, okay, is its own cells undergoing mitosis. So the best answer is 2. The baby requires oxygen, it requires food, and it has to get rid of the CO2 and wastes, okay, all through the placenta. Number 12 is 2. On to number 13. Number 13. A student infected by a common cold virus. Okay, a virus. Okay. Ran a low-grade fever. After a few days, the student's temperature returned to normal and the student was free of the cold symptoms. All right, the fever served as, okay, so now we're talking about the immune system. And one of the ways the immune system protects against pathogens, that's a word you should know. Pathogens are these invading microorganisms, although some people argue a virus isn't alive, but it has its own DNA, okay? And it is a pathogen because it can make us sick because a virus will attack our cells and duplicate and kill our cells. So what does the fever do? Okay, well, the fever serves, okay, to actually raise our internal or our body temperature. And by raising the temperature, what it does, okay, is it helps our body, okay, fight off these pathogens. These pathogens are usually singular cells. Now, I know a virus isn't a cell, but essentially what it is, it's a protein coat, okay, that has some kind of hereditary information in it. And essentially, if we increase the temperature, okay, we can essentially denature the proteins that are made from these viruses taking over our body. Denature means we make the proteins have a different shape and they no longer can catalyze the reactions to take over our body. But in any case, it's an immune response. Immune means that's our immune system that what? Fights off. Okay, if you're immune to something, we get immunity from vaccinations. So, and a pathogen is something that attacks our body. It's usually microorganisms. The word antigen, if you're saying I knew that but I didn't know what that meant, antigen is a word that describes a non-pathogenic microorganism that our body thinks is a pathogen. So for instance, you might have a allergy to pollen, and your body, because it thinks the pollen has a certain shape that looks like or feels like a virus or a bacteria, attacks it and gives the same kind of response. So this is an allergic response when your body thinks. So that's, I can see why you would take that. All right. So any case, a weakened pathogen is what we use for vaccinations, right? Vaccinations help us build up immunity, okay? Adaptive immunity, where we developed memory cells from the T and B cell. And these T and B cells, all right, are part of the secondary response, which is always going to be slower. But if we have a vaccinated individual, that secondary response will be faster because we already have certain white blood cells, okay, called leukocytes, that are there ready to attack this pathogen. That's what vaccinations do. They have a faster secondary response. It takes a little longer to develop them, okay, but they're sitting there waiting in the wings to attack if it does. So that's why 4 is not the answer. Even though it's talking about vaccination, it's talking about a secondary. The first response to an attack, okay, is usually swelling, okay, by the mast cells, but most importantly, that fever, okay? All right, so that's why 13 is 2. On to number 14. The fever it helps us fight off diseases, okay? And it's part of our first response, all right? And again, fevers, people think it's a bad thing when they're too high, but fevers are actually a good thing that help. So number 13 is 2. On to number 14. Number 14. Many animals have developed courtship behaviors. They tell you what those are. Males will often dance, swim, or sing in a particular way to attract a female. Males who are more successful at the courtship behavior will have a greater chance of having more offspring. Well, humans, okay, still do this. Okay, when people say, oh, she is so cute or he is so cute. Okay, we have, over the period of our millions of years of development, have also done these types of behaviors. People act differently in front of girls that they like, or people act differently in front of boys they like. So we have also been doing this. And why do we do so? Because we have noticed through the years what things have looked cute to us or attractive to us have been helpful in having better reproductive success. If you pick a male who has big muscles and you find that attractive, you do so because previously, through hundreds of thousands of years, if you picked a male who was stronger looking, therefore he's able to get what? Hunt better and bring more food back to your family. So what we think is attractive is due to making sure that we have more food, so therefore we can reproduce more. And if you reproduce more, you're going to reproduce more of people that have what? Stronger males. So this courtship behavior is part of natural selection where the what? Where individuals who have the best suited alleles, express genes, in this case I'm using more muscles on a male, are able to hunt better, be stronger, fight off predators. And therefore, we keep selecting for individuals that have the, we say, best genes. Now, of course, the individuals don't think that way, but that's how it works. If the individuals are picked that have the strongest and best and most healthiest genes, then our family members who are coming from them hereditary wise will also have the best genes that are able to live. Okay, so if we keep using males that have the biggest muscles and the strongest males dominate the other males, they reproduce more and have more offspring. And you have what? More and more increase stronger males in your population, and that is natural selection. There's a selective pressure, okay, for what? An allele that helps them survive in the environment. Before we had farms and stores, we had to go out and either battle with our hands other predators or go after prey ourselves. So that's why one is the best answer. Type of natural selection, okay, are these types of courtship behaviors, okay, that males and females, mostly males, do for females. Like you think about a peacock, a male peacock has all those bright feathers. If you are a successful and best genes of a male, you have bright feathers because you're eating the nutrition better. You're able to gather the food better to have these bright plumes of feathers. Any case, these other choices make no sense. Genetic engineering, okay, we're not talking about um, males in what? Or females in an ecosystem genetically engineering their cells. Okay, this is something that we manipulate the genes. Okay, we're not talking about that. Asexual reproduction, well, males and females are involved here. So this is about sexual reproduction, not a, it's okay, so we're not talking about cloning here, and we're not manipulating genes. Again, genetic engineering and 2 and 4 make no sense. We're talking about in the nature, natural what? Ecosystems. This is how animals have evolved to have more individuals that survive in their environment. Natural selection, 14 is one. On to 15. Okay, 15. After a zygote is formed, what is a zygote? Another vocab word. A zygote is an individual, okay, that has a what? Diploid number, which means it has all of the pairs of chromosomes it needs to survive. Okay, a zygote is essentially a fertilized egg that's now developing as a normal individual. Remember, a gamete would be its antonym. A gamete is like a sperm cell or an egg cell that has half the number that's made in meiosis. So after a zygote is formed through fertilization, now we have an egg implanted on the uterine wall, and it's growing and it's duplicating, undergoing mitosis. Here comes the question. Specialization of cells occurs, meaning eventually this one cell becomes 2, becomes 3, but eventually some of these cells, called the germ layers, eventually become cells of the heart, become cells of the brain, become specialized, become different areas of the body. We start with one cell, but eventually they differ into specialized areas. And this differentiation is what they're talking about. Through which process do the cells of a zygote become specialized? Okay, they do not become specialized by sexual reproduction. No. Okay, sexual reproduction is when you make a what? A gamete, half the chromosome number, and they come together. Meiosis is a good distractor because in meiosis, of course, we make half the cells and we make gametes to make sexual reproduction occur. The gametes have to form to make a zygote. So you must know that, hey, a zygote's made by meiosis of 2 different types of gametes that come together. Meiosis creates the sperm cell and the egg cell that must come together. So I can see why you'd pick that. Fertilization is how this what? One sperm egg, one sperm cell with half the number hits an egg cell and they combine. So I can see why these are good distractors, but differentiation is how the cell, remember, has a nucleus. That nucleus has all of the chromosomes, all of the what? All of the DNA is in every cell. So in the heart cells only use a portion of their genetic information. Every cell in the body has every single gene, but specialized cells are only using part of it. We don't know how to do that. So how does a cell turn on and turn off some of its genes? It's a process of differentiation, and definitely something that people are trying to study. Theoretically, we can take a skin cell from someone's body and be able to turn on and off certain parts of the genes to grow, let's say, another heart for an individual. We don't know how to do that yet, but differentiation is how basically how cells turn on and turn off certain portions of their hereditary information in their cells just to use the portion to make them specialized. 15 is 4. On to number 16. Number 16. A farmer wanted to rid his apple trees of a particular leaf-eating insects. He sprayed his trees with an insecticide that killed 98% of the insects. The survival of 2% of this population is most likely due to what? So they killed most of them, but not all. Why did a small amount survive? Now you need to understand this. In a population of a certain type of individuals, not everybody has the same genetic makeup. There is what we call genetic diversity. In a population, the individuals are not the same. We've seen this in another question. So because of genetic diversity, a word you have to have, genetic diversity just means that they do not have all the what? Diversity. Okay, you know, diversity. They all have different DNA. The DNA is different, which means if the DNA is different, they have different expressed alleles. Why is the DNA different? Mutations. Now, some of these individuals survived because they had, just by chance, the allele, the expressed genetic code to survive with this what? Insecticide. This insecticide didn't kill them because they had some type of resistance to them just by chance, but they're in small amount. And what will happen is these individuals were now selected for by killing them, and they're going to grow. They're going to be able to reproduce, and there's going to be more people in the population the next round to have them. But their variations, their genetic diversity, resulted from sexual reproduction. Why? In sexual reproduction, what happens is, okay, after to make in meiosis, we have this crossing over of these what? Chromosomes. And so genes get shuffled, okay, so to speak, and therefore the mother, I'm sorry, the son and daughter that results, okay, from gametes that result from mom and dad are not only just from different chromosomes, but those genes get shuffled, okay? Sexual reproduction gives the most diversity. Asexual does not, okay? And there's three reasons. Number one, we have this separation of chromosomes. We can either get the mother or father's chromosome in a certain gamete, okay? Then there's a random choosing of those gametes, and then of course there's going to be crossover that occurs that makes you have a particular recombination, meaning you can have not just your mother and father's chromosome, you can have part of your mother's. So there's incredible amount of diversity that is created in sexual reproduction that is not created, okay, in asexual. And that allows, that diversity allows you to survive when conditions change. This is how evolution or natural selection occurs. And that's why sexual reproduction is the greatest form of reproduction. It creates the greatest genetic diversity so that you can survive in new conditions. Because if there wasn't any diversity, 100% of the individuals would have died, and you would have eradicated that species. Species survive because of genetic diversity. They're able to do different things. And when environments change, okay, you select for new individuals that have the what? That have that gene ready and waiting to survive. So 3 is the best answer. Look at the other choices. Genes obtained from other species. We can't obtain genes from those species because another species cannot what? Cannot reproduce with another species. The idea of a species means that you are reproductively isolated. One species cannot reproduce with another and have those individuals survive. 2, certain chemicals that stimulate overproduction. Okay, that doesn't make any sense here. Their ability to produce food from their pesticide. That might be the allele, but still a pesticide, whether it's harmful or not, is based upon its resistance, based upon its genetic diversity. Okay, that's what this entire test is about. Can you see the diversity from sexual reproduction? Which, by the way, the diversity is usually due to mutations that change the genes. Okay, so 16 is 3, on to 17. Number 17, which occurrence represents an example of evolution? Boy, all these questions are somewhat tied to this. Okay, let's go to the choices. Now, what's evolution? Evolution means that there's going to be a change, okay, that occurs from one population to another. And that change results because there's an environmental, okay, change. That environment, the environment that the group of individuals that are currently what? Surviving, must now adapt because there's a new environmental stress. Maybe now it's warmer, maybe now it's colder, there's more rain, there's a new predator, who knows? But their environment, okay, is a new environmental stress. And so the population has to somehow change. Now, it doesn't change as a single individual, it changes in next generations. And the change that occurs is due to a selection of the individuals who are currently already available in the population in low frequency and low numbers. For instance, if we were to measure the height of individuals of us, let's look at humans. Okay, most of the people are in the middle. They're close to the average. Some people, okay, are extremely what? Tall and extremely short. And there's not many people who are extremely tall and extremely short. But what if the food now is available for some environmental reason, only available to those people that are what? Tall. What's going to happen is all the individuals that are short are going to die off. And all these people who are tall now will survive. And now the average height of the next generation increases. That, my friend, is evolution, or that, my friend, is natural selection. So back to the question. 2, a mutation in exposure to radiation reduces the rate of mutation. Oh, well, mutation is what creates the taller individuals. So no, we want to have mutations. 2, a mutation in a liver cell causes a person to produce an enzyme that's less efficient. That's a possible. Remember, to have a tall allele, it might be due to, okay, it's all due to proteins not working, okay, or working. Cells in a zygote eventually change into bone cells. That's differentiation. We saw that in a question above. When a cells turn off or turn on certain parts of their what? Genome, of their nucleus, their hereditary genes. Every cell has their own genes, and you can turn them on and turn them off to become specialized. But that's differentiation. Okay, some antibiotics are almost useless because pathogens have developed a resistance. That's true. Okay, and why have they developed a resistance? Because there was a what? A new environmental change. Now we have what? Bacteria exposed to antibiotics, and some of them die, but some of them have resistance because a few of them may be not tall enough, but now have the allele just by chance. And these are the ones that survive to reproduce. And now you have what? More and more of the next generation have higher resistance. 4 is your answer. Now, 2, let's look at this again. Why is it not your answer? Mutation in a liver cell causes a person to produce an enzyme that's less efficient. Now, I considered this one because when you have a change in your DNA, that could make an enzyme, okay, which is a protein. And remember, it's form and function. That enzyme catalyzes reactions, and maybe it doesn't work as well. And it not working well can lead to the allele being different, and that different allele could be something you check. So, um, so it's a good answer, good bad answer. The best answer is choice 4. Antibiotics resistance is the reason why they're resistant is that the next generation has evolved. Okay, because of a new environmental stress. That's really evolution here, okay? But 2 is a possibility, 4 is the best answer. On to 18. Number 18. Populations of aspen trees in western United States are being destroyed by an unexplained illness. The altered landscape is affecting the animals that live there. Populations of deer mice are increasing greatly in these areas, okay? So what we're saying is there's a change in the ecosystem because there's an altered landscape because of an unexplained illness to these aspen trees. Okay. Unfortunately, these mice carry a virus that are now growing that are deadly to humans. This scenario best illustrates that what? Let's go through the choices. A change in the environment always results in disease. I don't like this always. In the case that's given to us, that is the case, but not always isn't always, okay? There's always exceptions if I have to use always again. So this is too strong of a statement. This is not saying this always happens. They're just showing you this one case. So for that reason, I get rid of one. Okay, two, humans are the cause of the breakdown of this ecosystem. Now, we could say this definitely yes if we know that the aspen trees are being destroyed by humans, but it's an unexplained illness. Could it be tied to humans? Possibly, but because the breakdown of this ecosystem is because of the trees dying by some illness I don't know, we can't say humans are the cause, so we get rid of two. Number three, the stability of this ecosystem is limited by the amount of water available. I would say true. That's true, but is that is that what's being listed as this scenario? Here's a distractor that has a true choice in it. You know, water is going to affect this ecosystem for sure. It's definitely, but that's not the right answer because this setup of this question is not based upon water. It's based upon an illness of the aspen trees. It's opening up a niche, a new place for deer mice to live in. And this deer mice are carrying a virus that's deadly to humans. So this is not the scenario that's describing how water is affecting it, and that's why I get rid of three. And by crossing off my bad choices, I'm left with four. Every population in the ecosystem is linked with other populations. Hey, this is the interdependence of organisms with one another that we talked about in the first question. No organism lives by itself. We are certainly part of ecosystems where every different other individual has a job, and that job helps stabilize our own little area or niche. So we're all interdependent. If we break down and start losing certain parts of our ecosystems, then we're going to lose our own niche and be threatened. That's why genetic diversity or diversity in the ecosystem is very important. We've seen this type of question before. 18 is definitely 4. On to 19. Okay, number 19, the paramecium is a single cell organism that reproduces asexually. That is the key. Asexually means what? It does not make gametes that have half the diploid number, right? If we have an organism that has 2 chromosomes, it does not make a one chromosome gamete, and you don't get mother and father chromosomes. What you get is an exact copy. So number 1 makes no sense. Only half of the genes. So the question is, the paramecium is a single-celled organism that reproduces asexually. So you get exact copy, okay? And that, of course, is mitosis. The offspring of a paramecium usually contain only half of the gene of parent cells. No, that is sexual reproduction. And spermagenesis, if you had a 2 chromosome individual, you would produce what? 4 individuals, okay, with either the mother or the father's, okay? This would be the mother's and the father's chromosome, okay? You'd have more DNA than the parent cell? No. Okay? So we're talking about asexual, the exact copy, not half of the parent. You have exactly the parent. So 1 makes no sense. 2 makes no sense. 3, genetic material identical to that of the parent cell is an exact copy. You got to get that down. They're going to keep asking that. And 4, fewer mutations in the parent cell. A mutation could occur, so it's usually going to have more mutations, okay, or the chance of mutations increases as you go from one generation to another. So 4 makes no sense. 3 is by far the best answer. You've got to get it down. Asexual is making an exact copy. Okay, when you do sexual, you get what? 1/2 of the chromosomes, possibly one from you get one from your mother, one from your dad, and how much of each is based upon chance, okay? And that's why sexual reproduction gives you more diversity. Asexual reproduction gives you less diversity if you have the same copy, which can give you what? Less ability to evolve and survive in new environmental conditions. 19 is 3, on to 20. Number 20, a dead or weakened pathogen. A pathogen is a bacteria or virus or something that can attack our cells and us. It makes us sick. Got to get that vocabulary. Is used to establish immunity. Immunity is basically we don't get sick by it. For instance, okay, there's a chickenpox virus. There's influenza virus. There's different types of bacteria and viruses that we can be immune to, not get sick from, if we have a vaccine. So a vaccine is what we do is, for instance, the chickenpox or the measles virus. What we do is we take a dead or weakened pathogen or virus, we put that in our body. It can't attack our cells because it's been weakened or it's dead. But what it has is these proteins, okay, on the outside of these viruses, okay, that our body, our white blood cells recognize as foreign. And what it does in our secondary response is create something called memory cells, or it produces antibodies, okay, that remember this protein shape that's foreign to us. And those memory cells or these antibodies stay in our system so that when we do actually get that sick microorganism, they're already there waiting and ready to attack it. And there's a fast secondary response before it gets us sick. A vaccine is something you need to know, and that's why it's important for us all to be vaccinated, okay, to prevent these diseases from attacking us. You may say, what do we need a vaccine if our body will create these memory cells? Well, it takes time, up to 14 days, to develop this secondary memory immunity. And some people who are young, like children, or older people who don't have this secondary immunity because of a vaccine could die by this attack before we create those cells. So that's why a vaccine is important. Number 20 is 3, on to 21. Okay, number 21, energy question. Which statement is true for all the organisms below in the ecosystem? Remember, ecosystem is the diverse genetic makeup of different what? Populations of species that have a certain niche. A niche just means that they use certain parts of the ecosystem for energy, and they're tied to each other. There's interdependence, as we've talked about. Now, we have two basic types here. We have the photosynthesizers, the grasses and the trees. And what they do is essentially take in CO2 and they take in water. And what do? They make organic chemicals like what? Glucose, sugar. Okay, these other organisms, which are called heterotrophs, remember the ones that do this, make organic glucose from CO2 and water, are the photosynthesizers. They're the autotrophs. Think of automatic. They automatic make energies from the sun. So they're autotrophs. Okay, the sun's energy plus the CO2 and water makes organic glucose. This glucose is absorbed by these heterotrophs. And what do they produce? They produce CO2 and water. Organic molecules are the sugars here. So let's go through the choices. Remember, it's all about all here. They're not talking about one type. They all use energy to combine the inorganic molecules. No, 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 no. Who's using energy to combine inorganic? The photosynthesizers. They're using carbon dioxide and water, and they're making them to energy-rich organic compounds. Hey, the organic compounds that are energy-rich are our glucose. That's what we eat. So they're talking only about the autotrophs here. This is talking about taking CO2 and water and making into the organic high energy. This is only talking about the photosynthesizers, but they want to talk about all of them here. 2, stored energy cannot be used by these organisms. That is incorrect. Even plants that make glucose will store that glucose as starch and use it later. All of these plants, although they do photosynthesis, also are part of cell respiration. Remember, cell respiration is using the sugar. Plants use the sugar too. They have mitochondria. All right. So stored energy is definitely used. But by the way, isn't there stored energy in the fat cells of these heterotrophs? Absolutely. So plants and these animals both store energy. And by the way, don't we make ATP? All of these organisms makes ATP that's not used right away, so that doesn't make any sense. Moving down to number 3, energy stored in inorganic molecules is released during cellular respiration. Okay, well, it's the energy stored in organic molecules. Cell respiration uses what? Uses oxygen plus the glucose, which is the organic molecule that has the carbon and has tremendous amount of energy. That's an organic compound. So this makes no sense. Energy is used by organisms to obtain and transport materials and eliminate wastes. All living things need to obtain energy, need to transport the materials into their cells and get rid of the waste from the cells. This is basic homeostasis for all types of cells and organisms. And this is the best general statement that talks about all of them. Okay, so this choice, okay, I forgot the question number. Question 21 is clearly 4. On to number 22. Number 22. When a natural disaster destroys a stable ecosystem, what's a stable ecosystem? An ecosystem is when you have many different individuals, I should say populations of species that are interdependent, okay, that are doing different jobs in the ecosystem that everyone is dependent from, right? And you have many of them, many different individuals doing many different jobs. You have decomposers, you have the producers that make sun into energy, and then you have consumers and secondary, and you got prey, and everything's balancing each other out so the resources are distributed appropriately. So that's a stable ecosystem. It's going to be around a long time, and if there's a few little changes, okay, it can absorb those changes. But if there's a natural disaster that destroys a stable ecosystem, meaning it killed a lot of organisms, which means that there's the balance in the ecosystem is unbalanced. There's not enough decomposers or producers, and there's going to be a lot of individuals who will die. The temporary less stable than before. This is most likely due to a decrease in the biodiversity. This course, my friends, is about biodiversity. It's about genetic diversity, having many different genes. If you anytime you see diversity, almost all the time that's the answer. But having biodiversity means that you have many different species, okay, in an ecosystem doing many jobs, sometimes the same. So the loss of life of one species you can absorb by other species doing the same jobs. But when you lose some of them, okay, like a keystone species that helps balance things out, it disrupts it, and then many organisms will die because of it. So I'm not even gonna go through the choices. That's when you have to just know, okay, biodiversity, great number of different organisms, okay, that are interdependent. Another interdependent type of question. 2022 is one. On to 23. Number 23, an individual walks out of his air conditioning home to the hot outside environment. His ability to adjust to this changing environment involves a mechanism similar to what? It's important you understand the question, because people will read this and say regulation of water loss by guard cells in plant leaves, and they'll cross it off because, well, humans don't do that. You must read carefully. His ability to adjust to this changing environment involves a mechanism similar to what the guard cells do for the plant. Remember, on the bottom side of a leaf, okay, the top side of the leaf has most of the chloroplast, but the bottom side of a leaf has these openings called stomata, okay, and they're guarded by something called guard cells. Imagine that. And they open and close to regulate some things. Now we need to know air has to come into the leaf, okay, and of course it's a barely drawn leaf, but hey, here is, okay, the branch that comes off the leaf, okay. Any case, in photosynthesis, what do we need? Well, we need CO2, okay, that has to come into these openings. Now, you think maybe a water vapor comes in, but it really doesn't. Water, okay, H2O is taken up by the roots of the plant, and they go through the stem, and eventually, okay, they get to the inner cells of the leaf. And believe it or not, the water vapor, although water is being used, okay, water is being used in photosynthesis. Remember, CO2 and water is the two reactants you need to make the sugar, okay? So believe it or not, although water is taking up taking, a lot of water evaporates out of these openings. And these guard cells protect against losing too much. For instance, a cactus that lives in a very hot, dry environment would die if its openings were open during the day. So the stomata actually closes these during the day. So the regulation of water loss, okay, is due to these guard cells that open and close, okay, to protect against water loss. And that's the same thing that we do in a lot of ways, okay. We adjust our water loss appropriately to cool ourselves. Now, even though the plant's not cooling themselves, okay, what we do to cool ourselves is to actually sweat, and we lose water, okay, and sweat, and we sweat, and the evaporation by sweating cools us. So even though we're not really, the plant's not cooling themselves, the loss or gain of water, okay, through our sweat glands is more similar mechanism than any other of these choices. So one's the best answer. Digestion of carbohydrates by enzymes got nothing to do with water being released or controlled. See, in evaporation, the cooling process of being too hot. So we're talking about water being lost or not, okay? And certainly this has nothing to do with it. Using ATP for diffusion of water, again, we don't use ATP for diffusion of water. The water is going to go from that high concentration to low. Water moves always in that direction. So there's no real active transport there for water, all right? And a glucose production in the pancreas, okay? Again, not really talking about a mechanism for letting water in and out of cells, all right, to help us control um, uh, for either the temperature or the water loss in high temperatures. So 23, I can see why I'm not a big fan of this, because our ability to lose and gain water is for temperature regulation of our own body, and certainly water loss is about keeping the water there. In a hot day, a lot of plants will wilt because they'll lose too much. But the best answer, best mechanism that we have that's like sweating, where we'll lose water through our sweat glands, openings in our skin, is a lot like the openings in stomata that the guard cells. So the best answer is 1 there, 23. On to 24. Okay, this is another 24 is another kind of vocab question, non-renewable resources. They're non-renewable. That means once we use them, they're done. Okay, the best example is fossil fuels. Fossil fuels, the word fossil comes from the idea that these were from once living organisms. And so once living organisms, okay, oil, gasoline, or carbon-rich compounds that came from organic materials that have decayed over time. Okay, so because they're non-renewable, that means that there's not an um, um, unsurmountable amount of them. That means that there's only a certain amount. So the word finite or not finite is something you need to understand. So the word, if we're non-renewable, like fossil fuels that will run out, there's not a unlimited supply. So finite means, okay, non-unlimited, okay, if I can say it that way. So I would say that finite, the best word would be limited. There's a limited supply. We do not have an unlimited amount of fossil fuel. So clearly, if it's non-renewable, meaning there's only a certain amount, finite is what we want to pick. Finite means limited. And of course, if they're limited, okay, they will be depleted over time. We will run out of fossil fuels, and that's why 4 is the answer. You need to know what renewable resources sources are, and this could be wind or solar. Yes, we're going to run out of the sun's not going to be forever, but generally speaking, okay, wind and sun and geothermal, the heat from the earth, or something that's going to continue on much longer than the fossil fuels. Okay, so they would say 24, the best answer is 4. Finite is limited, not finite is unlimited. Okay, an unlimited would be for the sun or the solar or the geothermal. Number 24 is 4. On to 25. Okay, so number 25 is talking about the relationships among organisms and knowing how to define and use these definitions to understand their relationships. Daughter, a plant with no chlorophyll. That's the key here. Chlorophyll is essentially the chemical that's in chloroplasts, and that's an organelle. Okay, now it's not an organelle, which is a specialized structure that helps uh, um, photosynthesizers take in CO2 and water and make the organic sugar. So it helps with the autotrophs, photosynthesis. That means daughter is a plant. Because it has no chlorophyll, has no way to absorb light to make energy. Chlorophyll is that pigment that helps the organelle, the chloroplast, to photosynthesize. Without it, it can't do it. So it doesn't use the sun's energy to make sugar. Therefore, it has no way to make its own food. Okay, remember, plants make glucose, eventually becomes starch, and they use the starch, okay, to they themselves to for energy to grow. So it's growing on a living plant, okay, of a different species that probably has chlorophyll. It is photosynthesizing. And of course, this daughter plant is obtaining nutrients from the other plant. So because it's living on a plant and using it for nutrients, because it can't make its own, because it can't undergo photosynthesis, because it has no chlorophyll, that's the key here. That's the pigment that makes the plant green. It's the pigment in the organelle called chloroplast that helps in photosynthesis. The daughter then is a parasite because it is getting nutrients. If this is organism A and it's getting nutrients from organism B, which is the plant, and the B is losing nutrients from A, it's going to be the host. And the parasite, okay, is going to hurt the host because it's drawing what? Resources from it. And the host is not gaining anything in return. So this is a parasitic host relationship. Look at your other choices. Definitely 25 is one. Prey and predator. Could we say that the parasite, or could we say that the daughter is preying on the plant? You could, but because it's using its resources directly, okay, we call it a parasite. So if you think of a wolf hunting, let's say a rabbit, the wolf doesn't take resources from the rabbit directly, okay, while it's living. It hunts for it, kills it, then takes its resources. That's the difference. A producer is a plant, okay, and a decomposer could be fungi that helps through what? Cycle nutrients. This is a beneficial relationship. This we call a mutualistic relationship with both benefit, all right? Because the decomposer basically takes, let's say, the leaves that decay and uses that for food, but then it breaks down those things so that the producer, the plant, can reuse those nutrients. So this is the opposite, so to speak. They're both benefiting. Consumer and scavenger. The consumer is like it's like a heterotroph or some organism that's taking in energy, and a scavenger is like a bird that just eats off of dead animals. And so I guess there's a relationship here that the dead consumers, the scavenger, can use, but um, none of these are going to be harmed by each other. Okay. Any case, this would be commensalism if we have that word here in this course. But first of all, one is the answer, 25, parasitic host. Okay, on to 26. Okay, number 26, the three human hormones most directly involved in sexual reproduction, which means you have to have these hormones, which are chemical messengers that travel through the bloodstream, okay, that allow for sex reproduction. They must support our gonads or our sex cells or our sex organs. These are helpful in developing male and female characteristics. And you should know these hormones that are helpful in these female or male characteristics are testosterone for males, estrogen. Progesterone, of course, is certainly that hormone that's involved in the menstrual cycle that we studied. So these guys should be easy to identify. And 26 is 4. Estrogen is certainly one. Insulin is a hormone that's not sex dependent, right? It depends upon they're after me. I have to go. Sorry, just kidding. So insulin, okay, is a hormone that brings the sugar into the cells. Remember, glucose is so big it can't fit through. They're still coming into the cell. Remember, cell membranes help transport things, but the glucose is too big, so the insulin helps bring the glucose into cells. So that's not sex dependent. Okay, and that's why choice 1 is the answer, and insulin shows up in choice 2. ATP is not a hormone. Okay, so that's why 26 is 4. On to 27. 27. At one point, scientists observed that the ozone shield was getting thinner. They warned that the loss of the effectiveness of this shield may lead to. So you have to know that ozone is a protective layer of O3 that exists way up in our atmosphere. And what it does is it helps, okay, it helps absorb ultraviolet radiation that comes from the sun. It's a high energy photon that is actually a mutagen. It's a mutagen because if it reaches our skin, okay, it can actually break DNA and cause it to mutate. And that mutation that can occur in our DNA can lead to growth factors that make skin or other parts of our organs or systems or cells grow uncontrollably, and that's a cancer. So the mutation of our skin cells can lead to that. So the ozone absorbs the ultraviolet radiation so that it doesn't get to our skin. Unfortunately, some of it does get through. And if this thins and there's less O3 because of the types of chemicals that humans release into the um, atmosphere, we're going to be exposed to more UV radiation and have more cancers. So this is something you really have to know about the ozone and what the humans are doing to our environment if we keep releasing certain chemicals. We've control for this. We call them chlorofluorocarbons, or what we used to use in aerosol cans that used to attack this ozone layer. All right, so 27 is talking about an environmental impact that humans have made that could actually increase the number of mutagens or ultraviolet radiation that can cause cancer and skin cancer. And that's why it's exposure to the sun is something we have to worry about. And that's why people do put on the sunscreen to try to eliminate that. And that's really the only answer that makes sense here. Okay, so 27 is 2, something you had to know, okay, about an environmental impact of the earth due to human pollution and use of chemicals. Number 28. So number 28, as it grows from a seed to a mature plant, a plant will grow taller and thicker. Hey, it's growing, it's making its homeostasis is continuing. It's using and grabbing energy from its environment. Which are the abiotic? Hey, abiotic. Biotic is living, abiotic is non-living. So what are the non-living factors that a plant needs? What does a plant do? It undergoes photosynthesis. What's photosynthesis? Hey, CO2 plus water, okay, gives us the organic molecules. Okay, so what are the non-living factors? Okay, so, well, it's going to need water for sure. That's non-living. Sunlight's important because that's the energy that we use by the chlorophyll that's in the chloroplast that traps the energy of the sun. That energy drives the reaction between water and carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide's non-living, sunlight's non-living, water's non-living, and that's what photosynthesis needs. It needs water, sunlight, and carbon dioxide, and these are the things that make the glucose, which is the what? The organic compound that heterotrophs use. Hey, bacteria is living. That's why one's gone. Plant receptors, that's part of cells that are living. Okay? Plant enzymes, those organic compounds from things that are living. So that's why 1, 2, and 3 have biotic factors. Okay? So if you knew that that photosynthesis uses water and carbon dioxide and sunlight, okay, you are golden. Number 28 is 4, on to 29. Number 29, structures in an animal cell represented in the diagram below. Which row in the chart correctly identifies the functions of structures A, B, and C? Okay, all right, well, B you should know is the mitochondria. Okay, that one you have to know. Mitochondria. These are organelles, not organs. These are small little specialized areas of eukaryotes that do a special job. And of course, this is where cell respiration occurs. This is where we make ATP, that energy molecule. So it's about energy. You got to know that. Some people say the powerhouse of the cell. A is the cell membrane. And this is what controls things that go in and out of the what? Cell. This is a semi-permeable membrane that allows certain things in, certain things out. It's got to be selective. Not all things in life require all the water. We have to make sure only things that are going to sustain life come in and out of the cell membrane. So this is about the transport of materials in and out selectively. Okay? And if you don't know, this little dot here that's on the endoplasmic reticulum that allows the what? The messenger RNA to go from the nucleus and be developed. The ribosome is where we have the tRNA, and this is where we have translation occur. This is where protein synthesis, this is the ribosome. And you got to know the ribosome is that little subunit that helps actually make the protein from the DNA code. Okay, so given all of that, structure A is waste removal. Certainly could have been what? The taking the uptake of nutrients as well. All right. B is energy from its nutrients. It's the energy related form. And C is protein synthesis. It's where the amino acids that are coded for actually get put together in as a protein that winds up being an enzyme that does what? That gives us an allele. Okay, if it has the right what form. So 29 is choice 1. Other choices don't. You've got to know your parts of your cell and their jobs. Okay, so 29 is choice 1 on to 30. Number 30, the diagram below represents how air pollution may move across eastern United States in order to reduce the amount of air pollution in Pennsylvania. Okay, if you notice, all the arrows are headed to Pennsylvania based on the winds. Which change is necessary? Air pollution will travel through the air by the wind. Since they're all moving this way, let's see what choice will help reduce the amount of air pollution. Laws must be passed to protect endangered species. Well, we agree with that, but species that are endangered are not producing air pollution. So although that's a good thing, it's not a good choice that answers the question. So 1 is gone. The use of natural resources must be increased. Um, I agree that we should definitely do that, but will that reduce the amount of pollution? And that's a question. So even though that's a good choice in terms of what we should be doing in our environment, will it reduce the amount of air pollution? And we don't know. And of course, that doesn't really answer the question. Number 3, more coal burning plants must be built. Well, coal is a fossil fuel that definitely produces, okay, CO2 in our atmosphere, and also it produces components of acid rain, okay? Hydrogen sulfide and NO2s, SO2s, all of that produces acid rain, okay? So having more of them will produce more air pollution. That'll do the exact opposite. So you're left with choice 4, which is the correct answer. The cooperation between different states. Isn't there different states that are producing this uh, energy? In this case, it might be a different country, must be improved. So we're talking about the fact that we have to work with the regular other states to lower air pollution. That's why 30, okay, is choice 4. This is a question that you really can't memorize with a vocab. You have to interpret. So the only one that's talking about the different arrows from different places is the different states, and we must work together to eliminate that air pollution. And again, you could have eliminated the wrong answers to get your right answer. 30 is 4 onto 31. So we're on to number 31, and now we're into the second part, a little more tougher questions, they think, they say. Any case, 31 and 32. All right, we're into now part B1. Those are supposedly more application type questions. We will see. 31 and 32 is based on this food web. Now, food webs, of course, are about energy flow. And when you think about energy flow through an ecosystem, how does it flow? It always flows from the autotrophs, okay, to the heterotrophs, right? And the arrows are showing, okay, remember this is the plants who will collect the energy automatically from the sun, and then they produce the organic matter that the heterotrophs have to ingest and undergo cell respiration. So you have to follow the arrows. The arrows are showing how the energy is flowing. Okay, so let's go back or let's go frontwards to 31. So which sequence of organism represents a food chain? So the sequence has to follow the arrows exactly. The arrows tell us how the energy flows. And normally it goes from a producer, okay, who's on the bottom of the triangle, there's a lot more of them, to a consumer, primary consumer to a secondary consumer. Now, of course, we also have decomposers that help recycle information, but all they're asking here is, can you just read this? Okay, so now there's all types of arrows here, so it gets kind of confusing, but you have to read the arrows from one to the other. So we should always start with a producer. That's important. So if you notice, okay, let's go follow tadpoles. We know tadpoles are the baby frogs. They're not a producer, okay? But it still might follow the same flow. So it's going from tadpoles to algae to Daphnia. Let's see if the arrows actually move that way. So we go from tadpoles, okay, where are we? So our tadpoles here. Notice the tadpoles, the energy is flowing to the tadpoles. The tadpoles are not giving energy to the next line. So that's not, so they're saying tadpoles give the energy to the algae. Well, if that was the case, we would see energy flowing to the algae. Well, in fact, the energy from the algae is going from the tadpoles. What does that mean? The tadpoles eat the algae for energy. Okay, and the algae are a producer. So it really should be algae to tadpoles, but there's nothing that's eating the tadpoles in this food chain. So there's the Daphnia are listed here. If this was true, this would be pointing to this would be an arrow that goes to the Daphnia to show that the Daphnia are getting energy by eating the tadpoles, which is can't be the case. Okay, so number one is gone. All right. So we don't start with the tadpoles because they look like to be at the end of this food chain. Now, obviously in nature, something's eating the tadpoles, but that's not what this food web is showing. Look at two, sedges. All right, let's go find them. They're here. Now look at here. There's a lot of things. There's four places the sedges give their energy to. So sedges look like a plant to me. So this is a producer. Notice it's giving energy to the geese directly, dragonflies, moths, good. So the sedges give energy to the ants, do they? Hey, there's an arrow to the ants. Okay, cool. The ants are eaten by the frogs. Hey, there should be an arrow from the ants to the frogs to show that the frogs are gaining energy. It's an energy arrow, and that's true. And then the what? The kookaburras, kookaburras. I don't even know what that is, but I guess it's a bird. Are getting energy from the frogs. So there should be a what? An arrow from the frogs to the kookaburras. Okay, could they just make an easier a bird like a finch? They have to have a kookaburras. In any case, the arrow is flowing. So from this diagram, we see an arrow from the hedges to the ants, ants to the frogs, and frogs to the kookaburras. That is a flow of energy that's correct based on that. And the sedges are the producers. The ants are the primary consumers, secondary, and the top of the food chain for this part is that predator, the kookaburra. So that is the best choice. No sense going on any further. And if you go through the choices, you'll see the arrows do not move in the direction, okay, that 3 and 4 goes to. So 31 is choice 2. On to 32, which is based upon the same food web. Let's go to the question. Number 32, which population will be most immediately affected by the removal of the lizard population? Remember, these food webs, another interdependence idea. If you remove the lizard, or which population would most immediately be affected? So if you were to remove the lizard population, okay, how would that affect the other parts of this ecosystem? In this case, they're asking for which type of organism would be immediately affected, which means an arrow is connected directly. There's an energy flow. So let's go to our food web here, and we used it for 31 the parts in blue, so I'm changing my color. So if we remove the lizards, okay, therefore there's not going to be the lizards taking energy from the ants, so the ants will not be controlled as much. So the ant population will jump much higher because the lizards eat the ants, or there's a flow of energy. The lizards get their energy by the ants. So if you kill off the lizards, okay, there's not going to be a check on the ants. No one's going to lower the ants population. The ant population is not going to be eaten as much. It's not going to, the lizards don't gain the energy from them or eat them, so the population of ants grows, and that could negatively affect this food web, and that's why there's an interdependence. All right, so clearly the removal of the lizard population would affect the ants. Now, of course, it would make the ants go up in population, but it would affect it more so than the sedges, algae, and centipedes. And the reason, although they are, all those choices are affected, okay, somewhere down the line, there's a direct arrow from the ants to the lizards, and that's where they said the most immediate affected by the removal, by that direct arrow. Okay, so 32 is 3. On to 33. Okay, number 33. During an investigation, a student measures 15 grams of salt. Then he measures 15 milliliters of water. Adds salt to it. Next, he measures a 1 centimeter wide by 4 centimeters long section of plant leaf. Which tools is used to make these measurements? Okay, if you're measuring grams, that's going to be a balance or some sort of scale. Okay, All right, so a graduated cylinder balance. So this would be a balance. We're going to use a triple beam balance is what is common in most classrooms, and that measures grams or matter. Grams is how much of that. Then he measures 15 milliliters. A liter is a unit of volume. Okay, it's how much space something takes up. And you use a graduated cylinder to measure milliliters, to measure how much of that water. And then he measures 4 centimeters. Meter is a unit of length, and we use a ruler to do that, and that's why choice 4 is the answer. Number 34. Number 34, based on the information provided in the graph, the process that it's occurring is what? Well, in time. We're starting with grasses, okay? And as time goes on, who comes up a little higher? The shrubs come up, and then the birch trees, and then the spruce trees. And this is talking about how an open field becomes grasses, shrubs, and then what? Trees, and those are my trees, okay? And so that's it's called ecological succession. It's talking about how development of a forest over time by starting with certain organisms. And of course, once those organisms develop the niches, okay, then other organisms can be developed. And certainly it takes time to have biodiversity, but the grasses will be first, then the trees. This is showing the succession of ecology over time. And there's nothing more here for me to say is that something you have to be able to what? Identify. None of these choices make any sense. Engineering, selective breeding, it's about the development of organisms over time in an open field and time and development. Okay, so this is just something you have to identify. Number 34 is 1. Number 35. In number 35, which is showing, the graph is showing ecological succession. Okay, they want to say the graph and the time is most likely measured in what? Well, how long do you think it takes for an open field to come back into a forest? Aren't trees, okay, slow growing organisms? So it's going to take a long time for spruce trees and maple trees to develop in a forest. So you're going to have to say, because of the slow growth of these organisms, especially trees, you must be using the unit of time that's the largest. It takes years for an open field to become forest. Okay, trees do not grow in days, weeks, or even months. It takes years, and you know that by the rings of trees when you cut them. So 35 is 4. On to 36. Number 36, the mass of plants shown in the graph refers to the mass of the number of what? Well, if you look at our graph, okay, the mass of plants. Really the mass of the plants here is talking about the actual what? Well, the actual individual. If you have more birch trees, there's a lot more of them. Mass is a value that measures how much, okay, grams or kilograms, okay, how much matter exists. So we're looking at the actual individuals. And there's more spruce trees, there's more mass of them. Now, if you look at the choices, they have populations, decomposers. That's not the number of decomposers. That's silly. We're talking about the actual, in this case, producers in this ecosystem. Okay. And I say ecosystem because we're in an open field. So I'm going to say not ecosystem, it's an ecosystem. Communities are essentially groups of different populations. So that would be this second best answer, but really talking about how many grasses, how many trees. Okay, so the mass is the number of populations. That would be the best answer. Communities is a close, but I think populations, how many different populations, okay, are growing there. And again, I can see why you may say communities. Communities are groups of populations, but we're talking about populations of grasses, okay, which is a group of individuals that can interbreed, they're in the same species. So this is the best answer here. This is speaking to how many of the individual grasses or birch trees or shrubs are growing. So 36 is 1. On to 37. Okay, 37, the building blocks for this molecule are, you've got to know your building blocks. Okay, these are carbons in here, and this is an organic molecule. And these rings are glucose rings. And when glucose is bonded together, you make starch. This is a starch. This is a carbohydrate. Okay? Very important. Glucose makes starch or carbohydrates. So the building blocks of this entire molecule, okay, of this starch molecule, which is made in plants, because the plants produce the sugars, okay, are the simple sugars. Glucose is a simple sugar, okay, and glucose bonded to glucose makes starch, and you have to be able to identify this. Okay, amino acids, which have nitrogen in them, that's the one way you can identify them, they make proteins. Amino acids are the building blocks. Molecular bases are the building blocks of the hereditary information that's located on DNA and RNA. Okay, so that's important. You've got to know your building blocks, and you got to know what this looks like. This is sugar. This is glucose bonded to glucose. All right. So simple sugars, and another word for starch is carbohydrates. Something you've got to get down. All right. Simple sugars are the building blocks of carbohydrates or starch. Amino acids are the building blocks of proteins, which are coded for by the hereditary molecular bases that are in DNA. I don't know why I put DNR. Okay. Hopefully this test you do not go DNR. All right, so that's important that you know that. And how do I know I have amino acids? You're going to have N's in there. Okay, important. All right, so number 38. Number 38, the energy in this molecule is stored. Okay, where does the chemical energy or the energy we get when we eat starch? Starch is a carbohydrate. And the main job of carbohydrates, you should know, give us energy when we're undergoing cellular respiration. We take in sugars plus oxygen. And this plus oxygen gives us the energy to make ATP to run our body systems. Okay? Very important. So the energy in molecule is stored where? It's stored in the chemical bonds, right? The chemistry of the bonds here. Because essentially we break them. How do we break them? Every carbon that's in this compound, it's in a corner. They don't write it, okay? Becomes CO2. What is this? We take glucose, which we should know is what? C6H12. Oh, it should be a 12 there. O6, okay, plus oxygen. And what does it make? Individual what? CO2 molecules. And there's 6 of them. Why? Because there's what? 6 carbons. So all of these carbons are cut and the CO2 leaves. And of course, you make water. Okay, so every single carbon becomes free as a CO2 molecule. All right, so this gives you energy plus CO2 and water. You got to know this. Okay, and the energy comes from the chemical bonds. All right, the oxygen in the molecule is part of the oxidation that's required. Now, is stored when the carbon breaks off? No, it's stored in the bonds. The energy is released as the carbon atoms break off, as I talked about. When the water breaks this molecule apart, water does not break this molecule apart. Enzymes do, right? Enzymes break that up. So it's in the bonds. Okay, I don't know if you're into James Bond, that's right. All right, okay, so 38 is choice 1. All right, on to 39. Okay, so a little application question here. Number 39, we have the Enviro pig. A genetically modified pig named the Enviro pig has the ability to produce a bacterial enzyme in saliva to help reduce the amount of phosphorus in its wastes. Okay, too much phosphorus in the waste can lead, okay, to algae blooms if you're next to coastlines, but it's a problem. It's a pollution. Phosphorus pollution is a serious environmental concern, as I just stated. These pigs are expensive, but the cost is balanced against the benefit of the environment. There's less pollution if we use these Enviro pigs. There's also a concern that the U.S. Department of Agriculture still has not cleared the environment pig for human consumption. So this new pig that has an enzyme that helps reduce the waste, okay, has not cleared it for people to eat. Why do you think? That's an important piece here. Look at the question. Remember, these questions are really about the blurbs here. Government agencies and citizens should propose the use of the environment pig only after developing ways to remove the enzyme. If you remove the enzyme, people, then you remove its benefit. The benefit to society is that it reduces what? Okay, it reduces the amount of phosphorus in its wastes, which is what? A problem. Pollution of phosphorus is an environmental problem. So removing the enzyme removes it's the reason for it. Okay, so one makes no sense. 3, people have only after people have eaten lots of EnviroPig in terms of effects. What you're saying is the government agencies and citizens should do what? Use the EnviroPig in the future only after we test it on people, right? Have them eat it and see if they die. So we're not going to just only after people have eaten it to see if they die or not or have negative effects. We're not going to do human testing. Okay, 4, a different, cheaper pig can be produced regardless of the output of phosphorus. So again, if you develop a cheaper pig, independent of it making what? The enzyme that helps the environment, that makes no sense. The whole purpose of the pig is to help the output of phosphorus. We want to have this pig to reduce it. So if we have a cheaper pig that doesn't do what we're talking about, then there's no point of discussing this. So 4 makes no sense. Okay, the best answer is assessing the costs, the benefits to the what? To the environment by reducing the pollution of phosphorus and the possible risks to people, okay, that eat it. 2 is the best answers. Reading comprehension and slowing down and making sure that your choice makes sense. 39 is 2 onto 40. Base your answers to questions 40 and 41 on the blurb and this information below. Researchers have produced rice plants that can withstand being completely submerged for up to 2 weeks, which means they could be under a lot of water. That's good if you have a lot of monsoon season. Most plants will die. This is good news for farmers in flood regions in Southeast Asia. The farmers in this region rely heavily on this crop. The diagram below illustrates the process to genetically modify the plants, such as rice. So we take a bacteria cell. This is a plasmid. We have the gene. This is the genetically modified gene that's been genetically engineered, and somehow we attach it to a bacteria, okay, of a bacteria cell, so that the new bacteria can actually produce, okay, this important new rice plant. Now, the bacteria cell transfers the DNA to plant cells. So essentially, this bacteria kind of infects the plant cells. And then now the plant can undergo regular reproduction as it normally goes and distribute that new gene to all the growing ones. That's what's happening here. And you should understand that this right here of using a bacteria, a little bit of transformation is going on. All right. And transformation is essentially how we uh, engineer on the simplistic scale a genetically engineered gene. We use the bacteria, and we can use bacteria because bacteria use the same genetics as we do. That's why there's unity in life. Okay, so back to the question. All right, the molecules used to cut, copy, and connect the DNA segments here into the bacteria's plasmid or DNA ring. Okay, who are the things that do stuff in our body? Sugars are used for energy. Indicators help us see things when new chemicals are formed. Antigens are chemicals that our bodies think are pathogens and give us an allergic response, like pollen. So if you just eliminate your choices that are bad, you're left with enzymes. Of course, it's the enzymes that do things in our body. They're the soldiers of our body. They get things done. They run the chemical reactions. Okay, so the cutting of DNA is restriction enzymes, if you talked about them, but it's the enzymes that do the things in our body that make it happen. And knowing that, 40 is 2 onto 41. Okay, 41, the best explanation for these modified rice plants being flood resistant. That's based upon this diagram of transformation where we inserted a gene into a bacteria cell, and then we allowed the bacteria cell to infect a plant cell. Notice it's got a cuboidal, okay, squarish, and then of course let it duplicate. Okay, so the best way that we gave this gene the resistance is through the bacteria. Okay, so look at your choices. Let's go with number 1. The gene for flood resistance was inserted into plant cells using the bacteria. That's correct. Who, which grew into plants whose cells are expressing this gene. That's the answer. Let's go to your choices. Make sure that if you weren't sure, go through your wrong choices. They were produced by fertilization using gametes from 2 flood-resistant bacteria cells. They were produced by fertilization using gametes. At no time were we using cells that had the half chromosome number. We weren't using sexual reproduction. Remember, okay, bacteria duplicate, okay, by asexual reproduction. So there's no sexual reproduction happening here. We allowed the bacteria to infect the plant cell, and then we allowed the plant cells, okay, to divide. All right. So two makes no sense. They were not produced by fertilization. Okay, not at all. They were inserted. We inserted the gene. You can see it right here. We made it happen, okay, by inserting this gene, okay? So that's the reason why 2 is wrong. There was a mutation in the bacterial DNA. No, there wasn't. We created the gene. We genetically engineered the gene to make it transform, be uptake into the bacteria. That's why 3 isn't right. The researchers used selective breeding. That would mean that we took plants that had the resistivity to flood waters and we breeded that into. We didn't do that selective breeding. Selective breeding is how we develop dog breeds, okay? Or we make the old-fashioned way, I would say, of creating new types of plants with resistivity without inserting new genes. Okay, you would need a mother and father pair. Okay, and keep going. So, any case, number 1 is the best answer, where we did inserted it into plant cells using the bacteria. Okay, it's called transformation. 42. Okay, number 42. The diagram below represents two cells viewed through the same magnification with the same microscope. One possible conclusion that can be drawn about the activities of these two cells is that what? Well, we got mitochondria. And we know that mitochondria is involved in cell respiration. It's the organelle, the specialized organelle, okay, that helps in cell respiration. Cell respiration is where we take glucose, okay, and essentially we take glucose, which is starts in glycolysis, but the glucose gets split and gets used up, and we add oxygen, and we make what? We make CO2, and we make water, and of course we make energy in the form of ATP. Okay, that's important. So it's the energy producing organelle. So the problem is that mitochondria requires to make more energy. This cell obviously is a cell involved with movement or possibly it's a cell that requires more energy for whatever reason as compared to cell B. So therefore it has more mitochondria since the mitochondria is involved in energy. Another important point you have to have here. Now, in order for the mitochondria to exist and do its job and do what cell needs, it needs more what? It needs more glucose. So this cell has to take in more glucose, okay, which is a carbohydrate, right? And it takes in more glucose, therefore taking glucose in, and if you have a lot of these, you're taking a lot of glucose in, so it's going to be glucose rich. Clearly, the active transport is going to be bigger. Now, what is active transport? Active means you require energy, okay, to pull in the glucose. And you can also think that the energy being produced by the mitochondria is what's can be used to provide the active transport. Active means you have to be active, and to be active, you require energy. Active transport means that you must use some ATP, okay, which is that energy storing material that the mitochondria produces to pull in glucose against the gradient, meaning there's going to be more glucose inside than outside. And to do that, you're going against the gradient and you go from low concentration to high. So the mitochondria produces the energy in the form of ATP so that we can pull in more things. And that's why there's more active transport in cell A than there is in cell B. Cell B have a far less what? Far less mitochondria, produces less what? ATP, therefore it has less energy to provide active transport. You can think of it that way. 2 is the best answer. Now look at choice 3, get rid of. Cell B uses extra mitochondria to make food. We do not make food with mitochondria. We make and produce energy by utilizing the food that's ingested by the glucose. Cell A is a plant cell. Now, plant cells do have mitochondria. Don't just discredit that because it says mitochondria. But it has, I don't see a cell wall. We have a cell membrane. The cell wall would be another kind of layer here. And besides, plant cells are normally more cuboidal. So 4 is not a good choice. So 2 is the best answer for 42. On to 43. So number 43. So in 43, the diagram below represents the process of leading the formation of human embryo. Human embryo is a zygote. You've got to know a zygote is a fertilized what? Egg. Fertilized. Now it's fertilized. What does it mean? That means that an egg and his sperm came together and each brought, let's think of an organism as having two chromosomes, two pairs of chromosomes. The DNA is on these chromosomes. Let's just say that the diploid number is 2, okay? They only have 2 pairs. Now, obviously, humans have 23 pairs. Each sperm and egg only have half the number it's supposed to have. When they come together, the zygote has the right number. In this case, what? A pair. So what happens here is the reproductive organs have, okay, the individual's, okay, diploid number, chromosome number in half. And that's what we call making gametes. A gamete is a cell made by the reproductive organs that halves the chromosome number. Remember, if I have a pair of chromosomes, I have one from my mother and my father. How did that occur? It occurs because there was the male gamete fused with the female gamete. The female was the egg that had half the number. The male was the sperm. That's the most simplistic way to think about it. When they came together, now you have an organism with the pair, the diploid back. So when we think about the correct sequence, the first thing we have to have is we've got to form the gametes. We've got to take the individual with 2 chromosomes and split them, okay? And that's what we call gamete formation. That's what spermagenesis and oogenesis occurs in our sex cells. So that's why we have gamete formation. Now, once we have the gametes that have half the number, they have to fertilize. The sperm fertilize the egg, and then they what? Join. And because they join their DNA, now you have the full complement. So there's fertilization. And once there's fertilization, now you've got a zygote, which has the correct pair, one from the father, one from the mother. And now they can undergo mitosis to duplicate it. And that's why 3 is the answer. Okay? That is essential you understand this process. We start with what? A pair. I know individuals have more than a pair, but simple way. Then we make what? We split that pair up to individuals. That individual will do what? Combine with another what? Gamete that came from, I know it's an S, it's a chromosome, that comes from another splitting. Okay, they come together to make a what? A zygote, which has 1 chromosome from one individual and 1 chromosome from the other male and father. And now you have your zygote. Gametes, zygote. And now you can undergo what? Mitosis and duplicate this. This process of splitting in half is meiosis. Important you understand that. So the answer is number 3 for 43. Okay, and on to 44. Okay, so 44 to 46 is the graphing, okay, and it's based upon this piece of information. We have temperature changes and we have the percent sex of offspring in this study. This study is for most animals, sex of the offspring is determined by sex chromosomes. In some species of reptiles, including the painted turtle, that's what we're talking about. We're not going to actually paint any turtles. That's the name of the species. There are no 6 chromosomes. It has been discovered that the sex of the offspring is determined by the temperature of the nest in which the egg develops. Interesting. Maybe not. But the point is, they did a test where they changed the temperature. The temperature, of course, was the independent variable. Okay. And then we did what? Saw that the sex dependent, that's the sex was the dependent variable, okay, on that. And so they want you to graph that, okay? And you have 3 hours for the exam, so please take your time and get all your points. There's three points. They're going to give you a point for marking an appropriate scale. And it's important that you listen to the instructions. They don't want any breaks. Now, any breaks of the data means that you can't go 1, 2, 3, have a break, and then all of a sudden pick up 10. They want to see a continuous scale. Okay, so an appropriate scale normally means that you use all the information and you can put the graph in the biggest place possible. So if you look at your values, okay, I would make my temperature fill up most of my graph, and this, of course, this temperature scale, okay, I'll have fill up, and of course I have a percentage. Notice I have 100 to 0, so when I do the sex of the offspring, which the dependent variable always goes in the y-axis, so this is the dependent variable. Notice I went from 0 to 100 because they gave me 10 boxes. That was nice. Now I took the independent variable, which was temperature, and I started at 19 and went through 29. Even though I wasn't using 29, it's okay if I didn't use all of the graph. I used most of it. And so I have no breaks. I went from 0 to 100 because I had a 0 and I had 100. That was easy to see. And they make it nice for you. There was 10 of these. And of course, there is more than enough. And I started at 19. Could I start it at 17? Yeah, I could have started at 17 or 16 and pushed these back. A couple of different ways to write this. So I got a point for the appropriate scale without any breaks. Okay. Then I plotted a data and I connected the points and surround each point with a small button. So basically what I'm really doing is I'm getting a point for a correct um, um, uh, making these points. So using my table appropriately, okay, for instance, for the males, okay, I had 0% for 19, okay, and that's what I did for the males, okay. So for the males, which are a circle, there was a 0 at 19. For the females, it was 100 at at 19. And so I did that and I plotted these points. I'm actually just getting a point for plotting the points correctly for the, in this case, the females on top and the males on the bottom. Males, of course, take colder temperatures. As you can see, I guess you're going to interpret the graph in the next question. So a point for the appropriate scales without any breaks, a point for plotting. You know, it's interesting. They want you to do the squares and connect the points. Do that. But the key doesn't require that, but definitely follow the instructions because the key this year could. So connect the points as shown. Please do as shown. So you're getting a point for the appropriate scale on both the y-axis, which is again for the um, independent variable. I'm sorry, in this case, the dependent variable is always the y-axis, and the independent on the x. Okay, so 3 points. Plotting for the two males and females and appropriate scale. Do not. I'll tell you what, breaks they take off of. Do not disrupt your numbers. I know you say, Mr. Grotsky, isn't that really a break if I'm starting at 19? I get it, but they want you to start from a number and go continuously. All right. In any case, 3 easy points there if you take your time. So now we're going to move on to 47. Okay, which is going to be interpretation of this graph. So on to number 47, the fact that the sex of the painted turtle, that specific type of species of turtle, is controlled by temperature of a nest is an example of what? Okay, so let's look at that. Why is it, and we can clearly see that it is, okay, that temperature depends the sex. So why? Okay, so we look at that. And for me, the reasons why animals do things in nature is because it benefits them, because if they don't, they wouldn't be able to survive. So right away, I think of natural selection. Okay, but let's go through the choices. Natural selection causing a new species to form. Now, I don't know, the fact that the sex painted is controlled by temperature is an example of natural selection, well, causing a new species to form. I like this one because it makes sense that the painted lady was formed because it benefited from doing this. If it didn't benefit from doing this, it wouldn't have the ability to reproduce, be old enough. Prey-predator interaction. I like this too because maybe the temperature helps that, but I don't know. 3, habitat destruction, decreasing biodiversity. I'm not sure how we're just talking about temperature changing and having a habitat destruction. Get rid of this. Environment modifying gene expression. And boy, I'm loving life here with 4. The temperature of the environment is forcing the different turtles to express either male or female characteristics. Now, I said I like these choices, okay, because we know that turtles can be eaten by the prey, and that's why I always think with turtles and turtles trying to get to the ocean, that makes me think about that. But we're not really bringing up how the temperature changes and how a female or a male is better suited to what? To evade a prey. If they did, okay, that would be a good choice. Natural selection jumped out at me because, well, there's a reason for them doing that, but they're saying causing a new species to form. Maybe this would be a better choice of explaining why they existed this way. So the best answer, and I can see picking one or two. And this is a little tough question here, but the best answer is that the environment's temperature is modifying the expression of the gene. If you read the question again, or read the little blurb, what does it say about these guys? It says that the what? The sex of the is determined by sex chromosomes. In some species, such as there are no sex chromosomes. Okay, so they don't determine it by having a sex chromosome. It has been discovered that the sex is determined by the temperature of the nest, and that's an environmental factor. Okay, so the genes for the sex are not just on a chromosome; they get turned on and turned off by the temperature, and that's gene expression. You're expressing the genes that they have based upon the environment. And so that 4 is definitely the best answer. I can see why people would pick 1 and overthink this, but clearly it's the environment causing the genes for male or female to occur. 4 is the best answer. On to 48. Okay, so number 48 is dealing with this blurb here and this chart. We'll talk about it. So they took small discs that were cut from spinach leaves that had been treated to remove any air from the inside of the leaf. The discs were placed in a solution, allowed them to carry out photosynthesis. Okay, and we know in photosynthesis, very important, what are we producing? We're producing sugar, sure, but we're also producing oxygen, right? Oxygen is being produced, okay? All right, if it was cellular respiration, we're producing CO2. So we're producing a gas, okay? And that gas is less dense, it'll make them float. At first, all the discs sank to the bottom. These discs were then used for different investigations. Okay, fine, investigation 1. The discs were divided into 5 groups. Each group was exposed to a light of a different intensity, brightness, and measured in watts per second. Who cares if you don't know what this means? It's about brightness. The higher the watts per second, the higher the brightness. Some of the discs began to float. The results of the first investigation are shown below. So the percentage of disk floating increases as the light intensity does what? Hey, that light intensity is getting bigger, right? 0 to 0.036 to 0. This is getting bigger. So as light intensity, who cares about the watt per meter second, increases, hey, there is more floating disks. So what's the question you have to write? State the relationship between the increasing light intensity and the percentage of disk floating. Okay, very simple. As the light intensity increases, so does the number of disk floating. It's just that simple. So I write, as the light intensity increases, the percentage of floating disk increases. It's just that simple. You're just interpreting from the graph. All right, on to 49. So number 49, the substance produced inside the leaf discs that are undergoing photosynthesis. Remember, we're based upon this blurb here where we did what? We cut small discs were cut from spinach leaves that have been treated to remove any air from inside the leaf. The discs were placed in the solution, allowed them to carry out photosynthesis. They sank to the bottom, but over time we put light on them, they floated. So they're undergoing photosynthesis. And you should know that we produce O2. Yes, we take light. You should know in photosynthesis, you take light from the sun, which is the energy, in this case, the light from the lamps, okay, plus the CO2 that's in the solution, it's treated, okay, and we take the water, and from those two components, we make glucose or a carbohydrate that we use for energy, okay? And also you should know that what? O2 is produced. We get our oxygen. Deforestation, taking away trees from our environment takes away the O2 producers. It's an important cycle. So the gas being produced is oxygen, and gas is lighter, is less dense. Gas is going to float in the water. So it's going to be, if you did not know, okay, it's going to be the oxygen, okay, that's produced. Ozone is the O3 that protects our surface, protects the surface by absorbing UV radiation. We've seen that in a question, so that's not it. Okay, water is taken in, so that's not produced in photosynthesis, and nitrogen's not produced. So if you knew nothing, what substance is produced in photosynthesis? It's the oxygen. So that was the key there, understanding the product of photosynthesis is O2. And because it's a gas, it's going to bubble and collect on the leaf and make it lighter so it can float. So number 41 is 2, on to 50. Okay, number 50, which color of light appears to be least effective for photosynthesis in spinach leaves? So this question is about investigation 2, where we cut out discs, little circles from the leaf using probably a hole puncher. And we treated them to remove all the air, and the solution has stuff in it to help it photosynthesize. We added some light And that light of different color makes them float because it produces what? Oxygen gas. We found that in question 9, we're producing a gas. So the more that they float, the better they produce oxygen is an indicator that they photosynthesize more. They're telling you this is about photosynthesis, right? As we talked about, light energy plus what? CO2 and water, you have to know this, produces the glucose, okay? But more importantly, it produces, okay, oxygen, all right? And that's the gas that makes it float. So by it floating, we're knowing that photosynthesis is working really well. Now, when you give them different lights, there is more of them floating in white light than any other of the 3 individual lights in this test. So which color light appears to be the least effective? And the least effective light is green. That's the one that has the number of percentage floating. Okay, and you should know from photosynthesis that the red and blue part of light is what absorbs light the best in chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is green, if you remember, because that's the color it's not using and it's reflected back, if you want to think of it that way. It absorbs the red, it absorbs the blue, even though it's a buca, okay? The blue parts of the spectrum, and that's why you see green. That's why plants are green, is because they don't use the green. Chlorophyll and chloroplasts that help absorb light use the red part of the bloom. But you don't need to know that. Just look at here. The green was the least effective. It had the less amount of ones floating, and that's why 50 is 3. On to 51. Okay, 51 asks you identify the organelle present in plants where this conversion takes place. What conversions? We have to read the blurb. So question 51 is based upon this. Oriental hornets are unique. A yellow pigment in the body of the insects converts solar energy to electrical energy. Plants also convert energy from the sun. Just a weird question because look at the question. What are they asking? Identify the organelle present in plants where this conversion takes place. What conversion? Where plants convert energy from the sun. So even though they give you a picture of a hornet, the hornet's got nothing to do with the question, which is confusing for most people. All they want to know is from plants that convert energy from the sun, which is photosynthesis, what organelle does this? And you should know in the plants, it's the chloroplast, which holds the what? The chlorophyll, the pigment that absorbs light that converts. If it was the animal cell, and also plants will have this too, that converts and does cell respiration, that'd be the mitochondria. So the organelle that does the actual photosynthesis, that has the pigment chlorophyll, okay, is the chloroplast. You should be recognized that organelle responsible for photosynthesis in plants. Such a weird question because they have a picture of a what? A hornet, yet they're just talking about, hey, what's the organelle in plants? Even though this is not a plant. Weird. Okay, so on to 52. Okay, 52. We have a little blurb here. The SUNY Solicar model racing team's Sunhawk. Car of the future. Sunhawk is built by students in sunny New Paltz. It's prompted by Ford magazine to ask, is the $250,000 Sunhawk the solar car of the future? So it's basically a car that runs on the sun's light. Okay. There are trade-offs involved in the use of solar-powered cars. Provide one advantage and one disadvantage of owning a solar car. Well, advantage is you're going to use a what? You're going to basically use solar energy, okay? You're going to use solar energy as a what? Renewable energy source. Anytime that we're using what? Renewable energy sources, that's better for the environment. Remember, non-renewable is like fossil fuels. So this I should say, is a renewable energy source. Okay, I could probably say this much better. Solar energy is a renewable resource. Okay, as an energy source that's using. What's a disadvantage? How about the cost? Who has $250,000? Okay, and there's many other disadvantages. Remember, if using a solar car, is it going to work at night? Is it going to work when it's cloudy out? Okay. Um, Another advantage is you got no air pollution, use less gasoline, you're burning less fossil fuels. So many different advantages and disadvantages you can think of, even ones that I haven't thought about. But these are some major ones that should come to you pretty quickly. Okay, on to 53. Okay, and the blurb here, it's kind of what we do here in this part of the test, and you're going to use your knowledge of biology to sometimes just infer what this means. So 10 years ago, scientists discovered a well-preserved set of dinosaur remains in China. This dinosaur, which walked the earth 125 million years ago, had feathers and was about the same size of a turkey, but don't be fooled. The dino's bite was a lot worse than a turkey's gobble. After close and careful examination of the dino's teeth, the scientists recently concluded the dinosaur was probably poisonous. The study was led by David Berman, who works and teaches at the University of Kansas. Okay, state one inference. This just means, what did this kind of mean? It's an inference. It's not saying definitely, but it definitely is giving you a piece of information for which to make a general conclusion from. State one inference that can be made based on the fact that this dinosaur had feathers. Well, if it had feathers, and it's interesting, none of this really means anything, but there's an inference here. Same size as a turkey. Well, what else has feathers? Birds. So you could say that dinosaurs, right? Dinosaurs, okay, are what? Are related to what? Birds. Dinosaurs are related to birds, and you're done. Now, I can do this, birds. What do feathers help birds do? Fly. So maybe you could say that dinosaurs once could fly. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that, as long as it's logical, okay, you could say that some types of dinosaurs evolved into birds. Okay, dinosaurs are ancestors of birds. There's probably a whole bunch of other ones I'm not thinking of right now, but as long as it's logical, okay, it's an inference. But the idea is that feathers, okay, are what birds have, so they must be related to birds or help them fly, okay, or something else that would make some sense. It's an inference. It's basically some statement based on what was given here that you think is logical. Okay, so 53 is that written statement there. Okay, on to 54. Okay, number 54 is based upon this picture. This is a crow foraging, and what's cool about it is it's using a tool. So it's using a twig right here, okay, to get food. That's what this blurb is about. So if you read the blurb, it's about, the crow consumes a wide range of foods. These crows require tools. They require tools to extract the larvae of wood-boring beetles. So they get food by using tools. Okay, so any case, the question states, state one reason why the offspring of crows skilled at using twigs as tools would have the greatest chance of survival. Well, the bottom line is, if it's able to get more food, okay, it could survive better or produce more offspring. So many ways to say this, but you could just say they will have more food. Now, a really good answer would be, by having more food as a well-fed parent, you'd be able to have more offspring, and therefore the success of the what? Species will continue. And that's certainly a positive selective pressure. But you can just state the obvious here. Is very simply, they will have more food. Okay, and they will be good. Uh, It'll be likely be good twig users is another answer, but it's as simple as that. Okay, why the offspring of crows skilled at using twigs will have the greatest chance. Okay, the bottom line is they're able to get their resources from their environment better and therefore reproduce more and have more success at reproduction. That's the best answer. But as simple as, they'll have more food, they'll survive better. Okay, and survival certainly is to food. Now, a higher level answer is to reproduce. There's more reproductive success there. But 54, they'll have more food, works. Okay, so use it. That's simple. On to 55. Number 55, state one reason why some members of a population of crows equally skilled in the use of twigs have different rates of survival. Well, we mentioned in 54 that if you're good with using the twig to get food, okay, you'll have more food. But isn't there other factors in survival? Okay, you could be great at um, you know getting the larva out with the tool, but what if there isn't a lot of larva available? Okay, so there are definitely other factors. Okay, so you can just say that there. They didn't say there are other factors. All right. other factors, okay, that influence, okay, survival. And that could be the amount of larvae there. Okay, they could, also they could be, we talked about the finches. There's motivation. There's beak strength. There's other things. What if there's no twigs in the environment? What if the tree branches they use aren't there? So there's other factors just besides one, and they didn't say just state one reason why. And there you can just say other factors. They didn't say state a factor. So that's just it. Okay, so obviously there's other factors. Again, there be no twigs in the environment. There could be, for whatever reason, there could be another predator or another competitor it uses the other and eats the other larva. All those things. There's just so many opportunities in this area to say something logical. What other factor? Anything you explain that would influence its survival besides the twigs, okay, or just the skill alone, okay, could be accepted. On to number 56. Okay, number 56 and 57, we're dealing with a study. And you're going to see this in one question. This is how you're going to see it. So we're giving a possible study here. And the blurb is about African violet plants are grown for their delicate, colorful flowers and furry, soft leaves. How nice. People often want to touch the leaves and brush their hairy leaves with their fingers because they're furry and soft. Growers and plant owners were concerned that this could negatively affect the plant. One particular concern was that the presence of body lotion and other skin products could harm the leaves. A student thought this might be a basis for a science project, so he did a study. He selected 2 African violet plants. 10 leaves on each of the 2 plants were brushed with a gloved hand that's free of any type of chemicals that come from a hand for 30 seconds. Once a day for a period of 5 days. The difference was that the leaves of the second plant were brushed with a glove hand that had lotion on it. Okay, so this is a study. So what they want you to do, and this is important, every dot represents a point here. They want you to state one possible hypothesis. So you're going to write a hypothesis here. And when you write a hypothesis, okay, the best way to say is if the independent variable does this, the dependent variable will do something. The dependent depends on what the independent's doing. So you do not want to write a question, okay? And you want to write a hypothesis so that your statement is measurable. You might state it, write a line in the sand, make it state something. If you're right or wrong, who cares? So what's the independent variable? Okay, the independent variable is having lotion or no lotion on the glove. Okay, and what's the dependent variable? The health of the plant. So we're going to say, and you could say this any way you like, I'm going to say if there is lotion touched on the leaves, the plant's growth will be reduced or the leaves will wilt. Let me just write one, you'll see. So I said if the leaves are rubbed with lotion, the plant's growth will be reduced. See, if the leaves are rubbed with lotion, this right here is the what? Rubbing with lotion is the independent variable. We're testing if that variable actually has an effect. And then we're stating a line in the sand. We're saying the plant's growth will be reduced. The plant's growth is the what? It depends. It's dependent variable. It depends. That's the best way. Notice I don't have a question. And can this be measured? Sure. The plant's growth will be reduced. Now, could you say the opposite? If the leaves are rubbed with lotion, the plant's growth will be increased. Or you can say there's no change. All those 3 statements are stating something that you can test. But if you said, if the leaves are rubbed with lotion, the plant's growth will be affected, I would say affected how? And besides, you can't have a question either. Okay? Can you write a hypothesis without saying an if-then statement? Sure. Here's a couple examples. The presence of the lotion will slow the growth of the plants. Good. The lotion brushed on the leaves of the African will have no effect on the leaves. Lotion on the leaves has a negative effect on the plants. All of those are also very good. I love to say if then, but you don't have to. Bottom line is no question, and you must be measurable. Okay, and that gives you the first point for 56. On to 57. Number 57, they want you to describe the type of data that could be collected, type of data that should be collected to determine if the brushing was having a negative effect. Okay, I don't care what you said in your hypothesis that I described in 56 and how to write that. In 57, they want the type of data to show that you collect to see if it's having a negative effect. And there's so many different ones. You could say, I would say, let's say the number of damaged leaves. Notice it's a number I'm measuring. Has to be measurable. Hey, look at all the leaves that were touched and how many are damaged. You could say the size of the area damaged, the number of leaves that dropped or turned yellow, the growth of each plant measured in centimeters from before and after, the number of leaves that wilted, but it has to be some number, something measurable to test this measurable statement. Okay, so many things to think here, more than I'm putting here, but it has to be okay, some value that you can use to numerically measure and test your hypothesis. On to 58. Okay, and so number 58, we're talking about the pocket mouse, a very small mouse that lives in the sandy desert regions of southwestern United States. Who cares at this point? They are eaten by a variety of predators. Who cares? But they're active at night. Any case, the point is that there was a volcanic eruption that resulted in lava flows that changed the color of the area which the pocket mice live. And remember, they're eaten by a variety of predators. So a predator can eat the mouse if it can what? See them. So their color of their fur is a selective pressure that could be very beneficial or disadvantageous, okay, if they don't blend in with their background. What they're saying is they had a colored background for a long time, then a lava, okay, changed that background, which means that they were able to survive with some success with their old color, but the lava change in the background changed that. Okay, so in any case, just be aware of that. Now, 58, state the role of mutation or recombination. They're telling you exactly how to answer this question in the appearance of the trait for black fur color. You should know that the black fur color is an allele. It's an expressed gene. So state the role of mutation in the appearance of the black. Well, we started out with light brown fur, okay? And after what? 10 generations, okay, it went down to 5%. Oh, I'm sorry, and I'm sorry. You start with, in the 10th generation, you have 90%, 95% light brown. But after many generations later, there was a lower percentage of brown fur. And there was a what? Larger percentage of black fur. So brown fur changed to black. The frequency of black increased during this time period. Okay, great. State the role of mutation. Well, you should know that every single allele, which is nothing more than a what? Expressed gene or expressed gene, for instance, brown or black fur like hair, is an expressed code that we have in our DNA. Having these different alleles in our population is always due to mutations, right? So state the role of mutation. Okay, a mutation somewhere down the line changed brown into black. Now, a mutation wasn't responsible for changing the percentages. It was already, look, even when we started in the beginning of this, there was still some what? 5%. Okay, I'm sorry. In the beginning, there was still 5% that have black fur, even in the beginning. So it was already present. So having black and brown fur was already due to some mutation that happened many years ago. All alleles are the result of mutations. So let's get that down below here. So I'm going to write that for 58, a mutation resulted in the initial color change. The initial color change, right? You have to understand it, that the lava did not create the mutation. The mutation was already there. The black fur was already there in low frequency. We talked about in an earlier question having short and tall people in your population in low percentages. It's only when there was a selective pressure that made them what? The tall people, let's say in my example, survive better. People black fur survive better now because of the black background that the lava presented. But they just want to know the state of the role of mutation or recombination. And you could have said recombination provides greater genetic variability, right? Recombination occurs in sexual reproduction when the chromosomes what? Shuffle their genes in crossover. So you could have said that as well. But the mutation already occurred to allow for these alleles. They were already present. Very important. On to 59. So in 59, explain why the percentage of black pocket mouse changed. Remember, in the beginning, 95% were brown and 5% were black, but at the end of 100 generations after the lava flow, which changed the background, only 5% were brown and 95%. Why the change? Why did the lava change, which is an environmental change the percentage of mice that were once brown to change them now into mostly black? Okay, explain that. And so for me, it's a natural selection thing. The black pocket mice blended with its environment better, therefore more were able to survive and reproduce, whereas the brown now were contrasted, easily seen by predators, and far less of them survive, and therefore less of them reproduce. So I'm going to put this down. So I said the black pocket mouse were more difficult predators to see, and I like to say, and thus they survived and reproduced more. You didn't have to say that. After the color change in the environment, the black mice were more difficult predators to see. The black mice were harder to see at night. Many different ways to say this, but the bottom line is the environmental change, okay, was an impact. So the Y percent of black mice were changed after volcanic is because you could also say the opposite, that the light brown fur of the pocket mouse were easier for predators to see and then kill, and therefore they didn't reproduce more, and therefore those genes didn't continue on. But it's just that simple. Okay, so on to 60. All right, number 60, a scientist analyzes the bases in a segment of DNA from a human skin cell to determine if it codes for a protein. That's what this blurb is about. The base A is 12% of the bases in this segment of DNA. Calculate the percent of bases that would be C. Okay, well, this is really understanding how the base pairs in DNA pair up. I always remember apple goes in a tree. So A goes to T. So if you've got one segment of DNA, remember DNA is double-stranded, okay? Adenine goes with thymine, okay? And so A goes to T. And then we have a car that goes in the garage. Cytosine goes with guanine. Who cares if you don't know the name, but C goes to G. Car going to garage, A with a T. Now they're saying in this code that A is 12%. Okay? Now if A is 12%, and for every A you must have a corresponding D on the double-stranded, shouldn't T also be 12%? Sure. So when you add these up together, 12 plus 12, 12% of the A plus the 12 that must be with the T, because it has to be in the, what? A must go with T, so they have to be the same, gives me 24. Okay, now, what's the total percentage of C and G? Well, there's only C and G and A and T combinations, right? So I'm going to take 100 and I'm going to subtract 24. Okay, do my math. 10 minus 4 is what? 6. And then I got 9 minus 2 is what? 76. Okay, so I've got 76% left for the others. But wait a minute. They wanted to have C. So we have to have equal amounts of these guys. So 76% is for both of these, but I just want one. And because they're in equal quantities, every C there's a G, I'm just going to divide 76 by 2. So you take your handy dandy calculator, divide that by 2, and what you get is you get 38%. So it seems a little tricky, but it's pretty straightforward. By understanding as many A's, there's T's. So 12% A gives you 12% T for a total of 24. 24% subtracted by 100% gives you 76% left. There's only C and G left, so that's 76. Because I just want C, and these have to be an equal number, I divide by 2. So that each one of these is 38. 38% for C and 38% for G. And that's why the answer is 38. On to 61. Number 61. Is it likely this segment DNA codes for a protein? Circle yes or no and support your answer. Now we have to go back into the reading. So if we look at the reading, it says often Scientists look at the percentage of bases in a segment of DNA. If the segment of DNA has a large percentage of C and G bases together over 50%, it is likely that a gene codes for a protein. Is this likely segment of DNA codes for a protein? And we would say, well, when you C and G together over 50, well, we found that C and G together is 76%, right? 38 plus 38. So we would say yes. Oops, yes. And we would say yes because what? The percent of C and G is over 50%, plain and simple. Okay. Um, and here we go on to 62. So number 62, use of terms of antigens and antibodies. So they want you to mention those. Important. Explain why the tumor cells are ignored by the immune system. So as it stated in the um, blurb, the Tasmanian devil is suffering from a devil facial tumor disease, type of cancer. And they shown by the evidence that they found by researching these that the Tasmanian devil accepts tumor cells from another devil as if they were cells of their own body. So if they think they're from their own body, the immune system won't attack. So explain why the tumor cells are ignored by the immune system. So many things you can say here, but the bottom line is if they think they're from their own body, then the antigens on the surface of the tumor cells, okay, these chemicals which are really receptors, okay, are interpreted as being from our own cells. Okay, so let me just write what I want to say here. So I wrote the tumor cells lack the antigens that the antibodies can recognize. The antibodies are these proteins, or these kind of Y-shaped proteins produced, okay, by our immune system that attack certain chemicals that are foreign to us, and those chemicals are really on the outside of cells. They're glycoproteins that have a certain shape, and we have these antibodies that, if they fit these shapes perfectly, will clump up, okay? And that clumping up will help kill them, all right? So these tumor cells, if they're not recognized by the body, don't have these antigens. And we talk about antigens a lot. If, for instance, and it's kind of a loosely used word, um, they're definitely receptors, but if you have a type A blood, okay, that means you have a blood cell that produces, okay, an A type of glycoprotein, and so and thus have an A antigen, okay, which means if I give this blood, okay, to someone who is B type, okay, there's going to be antibodies in the person with a B blood type that will attack this antigen, okay, and kill it, okay? So that's important to understand. So this antigen, which is really a receptor, a protein receptor, is not an antigen for A, it's the same type of cell. So in the case of the Tasmanian devil, okay, the cancerous tumor growing cells has these proteins or these antigens on the outside that are very similar to its own, and so it doesn't recognize them as being foreign. Okay, so that's where the word antigen comes from, and I may have used that improperly in an earlier question, but they're using in a living environment, the word antigen is these receptors, okay, that are foreign, all right, and that's what they're after here for 62. On 63, explain how cancer cells differ from normal cells. Well, cancer cells have uncontrollable growth, okay, they don't have any ways to stop, so um, cancer cells undergo uncontrolled cell division, so cancer cells grow faster, you could say, okay, uncontrolled uncontrollable cell division. And so they grow faster, take up resources, push out other living areas of the body, and could be, of course, deadly. Okay. And they're more harmful. They disrupt homeostasis. Gosh, you could say almost anything as a taking how to they're more they're more harmful, disrupt homeostasis. They could have more mutations. Almost anything, okay, works here that is geared toward the fact that they're different. Okay, but the best answer is that they have their uncontrollable growth. Okay, All right. And there's nothing to kill them. That's why they can grow so much. And they have, if you go detail, they don't have any stop chemicals they make to stop them from growing that normal cells do because of their mutations. So cancer cells, you can also say, have more mutations that allow them to be uncontrollable. Okay. Any case, on number 64. Number 64, describe one possible way to maintain a population of healthy, unaffected Tasmanian devils until a treatment or cure can be found. Oh man, they're going to accept just about anything that makes any sense. Okay. For me, how about you separate the infected from the sick? Keep the sick away from the uninfected. That's one thing. Um, Separate the animals while they are feeding. Provide more food to decrease competition and fighting. Remove baby devils from the population and place them in a zoo or wildlife refuge. Move the infective animals away from the infected. So I'm going to say, so I said keep uninfected animals away from infected animals, and that works. Cover their faces. Man, there's so many different things that make sense that just logic they'll accept. On to 65. Okay, number 65. Explain why coyotes were not in competition with the lynx prior to the presence of packed snow trails. So we've got this little blurb here for 65 to 67, and they say very simply, lynx are found in areas where there's deep, soft snow covered during the winter months. The design of the Canadian lynx helps keep the animal on top of the snow. Okay, so they're found where there's deep, soft snow, so they have adaptations for being on top of the snow. Several unique characteristics, such as the design of its feet and its weight, enable the cat to successfully chase and catch snowshoe hares as its primary source of food. Snowshoe hares are able to remain. So they have a way to stay on top of the snow, and therefore they can hunt things on top of the snow, even when there's a lot of snow. Increased winter recreation, like skiing, has created packed snow trails. This allows coyotes and cougars who do not have the adaptation in deep soft snow to compete with the lynx because the packed snow, they can stay on top now. Okay, so 69 should make some sense to you. Explain why coyotes were not in competition with the lynx prior to the presence of packed snow trails. So I write, the lynx is adapted to stay on top of the snow while the coyotes are not. Okay, they need to have the packed snow to stay on top. All right, you could also say, um, coyotes could not prey on animals in the same area as lynx. Okay, you could also say the coyotes lacked the foot design of the lynx, could not chase the hares where the snow was soft and deep. Coyotes cannot walk in deep, soft snow. As you can see, anything that talks about the fact that the lynx can stay on top and coyotes can't. All right, on to 66. Number 66, describe the niche that the lynx, coyote, and cougar are competing to fill. The niche, remember, is that place in the ecosystem, the job, its role that keeps the ecosystem correct. Without that role, you'd have an unstable ecosystem. So these guys are what? Predators. These are going to be the main predators for this snowshoe hare, this type of um, bunny rabbit. Okay, and why are they important prey? Because without the prey, the snowshoe hares would grow uncontrollably, and they could unbalance the ecosystem by taking too many resources away if they grow in higher numbers. So it controls their numbers. So I write, the niche is being the predator to the snowshoe hare in that environment. Okay, I guess I have to say that being the predator to snowshoe hare in the deep snow environment. But if you just said the niche is being the predator, I think would work just as well. Okay, so number 66, on to number 67. Number 67, we're talking about explain how the carrying capacity, that represents what? The max amount of organisms of a certain population that can live due to the available resources. So explain how the carrying capacity affects the number of predators in the area. The predators, there's only so many predators that can survive in an area because only so much in this case, snowshoe hares available or food. So I said there's a limited number of prey that can support only a limited number of predators. This is the interdependence we've been talking about throughout the theme of this test. Okay, it's a balance. The predators can't go uncontrollably. There's only so much prey, and the prey can't go uncontrollably. Everybody's interconnected. On to 68. So number 68, state one way that the use of pesticides to kill ticks could lead to the decline of the ox pepper population. So in the reading above for 68, they said that South African cowherds Cowboys are discovering that when it comes to debugging their cattle, nature knows best. Generations of cattle owners who dipped their livestock in pesticides ended up killing not only ticks, but ticks that feast them, but also the red-billed ox peppers that eat the ticks. So, state one way that the use of pesticides kills ticks could lead to the decline of ox pepper. So I wrote, the ticks were the food for the birds. You take away the ticks, you take away, okay, um, an energy level or trophic level the birds need to eat. You take their food away. This interdependence of organisms. We keep talking about this food web. Energy goes from the ticks to the birds. You take the ticks away, the birds have less energy. Therefore, their populations will decline because there's less food to support them. The carrying capacity is dropped. All right, there's just less resources. Okay, could you say other things? Absolutely. The ticks could become toxic and the oxpecker could eat them, could get sick and die. The pesticides could kill the birds too. Okay, without the ticks for food, the bird patient dies off. There's all different types of things that make sense in terms of, okay, these answers that somehow show that the birds are affected by the pesticides. And best answer is you're taking away their food source, I think. On to 69. So 69, state one ecological advantage. Ecological means how animals are interrelated, how they're you have a benefit relationships between animals that are either in a food web or have different niches in the ecosystem to keep it balanced and keep it stable and keep it running. So state one ecological advantage of using the oxpecker birds to solve the problem with the ticks on the livestock. So why is it better to use the birds to kill the ticks and not the pesticides? That's really another way to rephrase this. I wrote, it eliminates the use of harmful chemicals. That's simple. You could say each ox pepper from the region can eat 13,000 ticks a day, reducing the problem. Biodiversity is increased, okay, by allowing the ox peppers to live. Um, you know, so 69, so many ways to say the birds have food to eat, okay? It will save the ox peppers from extinction. All of that makes sense in answering that question. On to number 7. Okay, number 70, state one possible relationship between CO2 levels and the change of Antarctic ice mass, ice caps. Okay, so let's go to the data that's presented in this blurb they give us here. And we see the data clearly shows as the CO2 parts per million, it's a concentration, goes what? Goes up. The Antarctic mass amount, mass is how much amount, goes down. It's just that simple. Let's put that answer down. So I say as CO2 levels increase, ice mass decreases. Thank you for that point. It's an easy one. Just look at the graph. One is going down, one is going up. Okay, on to 71. On to 71 here. Explain why the change in ice mass results in the decline in the penguin populations. We got to go back to the blurb. Okay, so what do we know? We know that the ice mass does something here. So they talk about here new evidence pointing to decline in their food supply. So we said over the past few decades, researchers have observed declining numbers of two species of penguins native to the West Antarctic Peninsula. Okay, penguins live on ice. New evidence is pointing to a decline in their food supply as the primary cause for the recent drop. So there's less food for the penguins. Imagine that. Have we seen that somewhere in other questions? These penguins feed on krill, small ants that grow and develop under the ice. Their food lives under ice. So if there's less ice, there's less food for the what? For the penguins. Let's get that down. I said less ice, fewer krill for the penguins to eat. The penguins' food source grows and develops under the ice mass. Loss of habitat for the penguins. So many things to say, but somehow along the way, having less ice, okay, makes it harder for the penguins to survive because there's less food along those lines. On to 72. Now, 72, state one specific way in which humans might have caused the changes in the atmospheric CO2 levels. This is about the impacts that humans have. So what do you think? Well, we would say, how about burn? Humans have burned fossil fuels that release CO2. Okay, so many different ways to say that. You could say driving cars. We could say increased industrialization. You could say deforestation. Okay, because, well, taking away the what? Photosynthesizers of the trees, They absorb less CO2. So that's just something you should know by the human impacts part of your course. On to 73. Number 73, which statement best describes what would most likely be observed in 20 minutes? We have starch iodine, I'm sorry, starch solution, my bad. So we have starch in here, and then we have the indicator, which is the iodine, right? And so as this is a question that's really about your labs at the end of the year or your state labs, you should be studying them or know them. And because there's no iodine in here, okay, and because it was allowed by your lab, iodine rushed in. And one of the things you should know is that there's a blue-black color that results when iodine starch reacts. Starch can't get out because it's such a big molecule. It can't fit through the pores of the dialysis tube, which is supposed to be a cell membrane. But the iodine, okay, is small enough to go inside. And a positive test for starch, okay, if you remember, is that blue-black color from the iodine when it hits the starch solution. So we would expect the contents of the dialysis tubing to turn blue-black because that's where the starch is and that's where the iodine will diffuse. Or if you don't like iodine, the starch indicator was able to go into the bag, and that's what happened in your lab. And that's why you're supposed to study these labs if you don't remember. Liquid in a beaker would not turn blue-black because the starch is not going to diffuse out. It's too big. It doesn't fit through these pores. Okay? The dialysis bag would burst. It didn't burst. Okay? In truth, it does get a little bit bigger, and there's definitely a visible change. So 73 is 1, and that's remembering what happened in your lab. On to 74. As I mentioned in 73, the starch indicator is really iodine, and because it was on the outside, it diffused in by diffusion, passive transport. There was a lot more iodine on the outside than the inside. And because the pores are small enough, we see the iodine diffused in. Okay, diffusion is from going from high concentration iodine outside to inside. None of these other choices make any sense. Active transport is when you go against the gradient, you would need ATP, and this setup doesn't have that kind of a system available, just pure diffusion. 74 is 3. On to 75. Okay, number 75 confused a lot of people because there's so many distractors here. There's so much information. But a student filled a dialysis tube with 97% water. Okay, so it's 90% water, H2O, in this dialysis tubing. Okay, it's tied on both ends. Okay, it's placed in a solution. We don't know the solution, but it's placed in a solution. This is, and you can guess. Okay, now the tube and its contents had a mass of 55. So we have 55 grams of water here. Okay, now it's placed in a solution. It doesn't say what the solution is. And the mass of the tube and its contents increased to 60 grams. All we know is we placed it in a solution. Okay, I'm in a beaker here. Okay, and all I know is that this went from 55 to now 60. So somehow, guess what? Water rushed in. So if it was 55 grams and now it's 60, the only thing that came in through this dialysis tubing probably was the water. Okay? That's the whole point. It's osmosis. That's what we did in the lab. And now the question is, what is the solution? Into what solution was the dialysis tube placed so that, okay, water rushed in? Well, water rushes in from what? High concentration to low. If the dialysis tubing was 97%, then you should have a solution that is what? Hypotonic, if you like those words, but 99% water. There was more water on the outside. It was more dilute. And that's why choice 4 is the answer. If you're going to have an increase, okay, and therefore water is going to go from what? High concentration to low. And that's why choice 4 is the answer. It's the only choice that has a higher concentration of water than the bag after. And that's how water moves. Osmosis, okay, is water moving, is really diffusion of water from high concentration to low. The only way for the water to increase and the bag to increase is because there's less of it inside, and so more water rushed in, and choice 4 is the answer. On to number 76. Okay, number 76. Which statement best describes the method used to determine the evolutionary relationships between the three species of finches? So what we have is electrogel phoresis, and we've got ourselves some banding patterns on a gel. So we loaded the DNA from species A into well 1, well 2, and well 3. We added a restriction enzyme that took this DNA that was extracted, and we basically did what? We cut it into fragments. Okay, now, if the DNA is similar, then the fragments will be similar. There's a reason for that. Okay, you should understand electrogel phoresis. Oops, there is, okay, areas called palindromes. You have to know that, but there's areas called palindromes where restriction enzymes that are added will cut at certain sequences. So if the DNA is similar, guess what? You'll have similar sequences that can be cut, and therefore you're going to have similar what? Similar size fragments. And in gel phoresis, let me get rid of below here, okay, we move these fragments by making an electrical charge, okay, come positive on one end of the gel and negative. And because DNA is electrically charged negative, okay, the fragments that are lighter, okay, move more than the fragments who are heavier. And that's how we discern banding patterns. If you notice, species A and species B have similar banding patterns because they have similar size fragments, because they have similar DNA. Whereas species C has different banding patterns. They're going to have different places where the restriction enzyme can cut because they have different DNA compared to the others. So what we're looking for here is, this is evidence about the DNA structure. So if we look at our choices, okay, describe the statement best describes the method used to determine the evolutionary relationships. Examine the structure of the beaks, not with electrogel phoresis. Observe the behavioral and physical characteristics, not with electrical gel phoresis. We're not doing that way. Obtain a molecular evidence from all three and identify similar. That's what we're doing. We're determining or looking at the molecular evidence of the DNA, okay, by looking at its banding patterns of its fragments that are similar or dissimilar, which means similar DNA or dissimilar DNA. 3 is so much the right answer. Compare common ancestors. No, 3 is the answer for number 76. On to 77. So number 77, based on the data they collected using gel electrophoresis above, label the branching tree diagram below. So this is a phylogenetic tree or a cladogram. We'll call it a phylogenetic tree. Bottom line is, where there's branching is the most similar. Who has the most similar fragments? As I said before, if the fragments are the most similar, they have the most similar DNA. That's what happens is we take the DNA, as I mentioned in 76, we cut it up using restriction enzymes that identify certain DNA sequences. Well, if your sequences are similar throughout, so is going to be the places where the restriction enzyme cuts. And we're separating these guys by their size of their fragments. So clearly the banding patterns in the gels are what? More similar for A and B. So I want to put them on the same clade or fork. So I put A and B, and C is the outgroup because it's most dissimilar. Now, A and B can be written on either side. You can put A here or B here, does not matter. But C has to be here to get that point. On to number 78. So in 78, we have another blurb and some information. And so 2 species of finches are found on a particular Galapagos island to eat seeds of certain variety of plants. Again, this question is geared to your end of the year. Hopefully you did it end of the year to remember, or you studied your finch lab with the beaks. The relative strength of the beaks is shown in the graph. So so they're found on a particular island and eat seeds of certain variety of plants. And here are the beak strengths of 2 finches, species 1, species 2. One of the finch species has a slightly smaller, weaker beak. Is this species 1 or species 2? Well, I'm going to go with the smaller beak, okay, has smaller muscles attached to it. So I'm going to say species 1. Very simple, okay? But I have to do what? Support your answer from the graph. And all I would say is that, I don't know, more of species 1 are at the low strength end of the graph. More of them are toward the left of the graph. I mean, What else could you say? So many ways to say it. Because species one has a weaker beak than species two, except where the two lines overlap. They have weaker beaks because the majority of the population is at the low end of the graph. Okay. Okay. So something along the lines of that. On to 79. So 79. Select the point in the graph where the beak strength of the two birds is equal. Hey, where do they intersect? Hey, point C. Just reading the graph. Pretty straightforward. So point C, and you got to support your answer. So I said, because that is where they intersect. And I said that with an exclamation point, okay? Or at point C, the beak strength has the same value for both species. Many ways to say that. On to number 80. So number 80, if the environment on the island changed, a new environmental stress, evolution, and the seeds of more plants became harder to crack open, describe what the graph might look like after many years have passed. So if there's going to be a selective pressure, meaning if there's now more seeds that are tougher to open, boy, we're going to have a shifting of individuals to have a larger beak strength because those smaller amounts, okay, of individuals who have the alleles to crack open these bigger, okay, are now going to increase, okay, because they can survive more. So the frequency of these bigger, stronger beaks will increase. So I say the curve for species one would increase, okay? I could also say there would be more individuals in species two than species one. I could say both curves might show an increase in beak strength. The curve for species one would be eliminated. The curve for species one may be lower and shorter. I mean, all of that is acceptable, and all of that is logical in the fact that there's going to be more birds with stronger beaks that survive. Okay, on to 81. 81, the process used to remove excess water from the paramecium by the contractile vacuole is what? Well, it's either going to diffuse out or actively transport out, depending upon what kind of water or solutions they live in. So if we go into the reading, all right, he researched the organism in science and found that the structure was a contractile vacuole and its function was to remove excess water from the paramecium. Okay, so it seems that, so we have a contractile vacuole. Water moves from the canals into the vacuole. Okay, pure pores open, the contractile contracts. Contraction of the vacuole expels water from the cells. Okay, so we are removing water. Okay, so if we're removing water, okay, from the paramecium in this process, water must be rushing in normally. Now, if that is the case and water is building up, okay, we have to find a way to extract it. Now, let's think about this for a second. We don't know exactly what's happening here, so I'll read. He decided to determine if the concentration of salt in the environment of the parasite would affect the rate. So the key, I think, here is noticing the paramecium live in fresh water. Fresh water has low amounts of salt, if any, so there's not much. Inside the paramecium, there's a lot more stuff, proteins, enzymes. So there's a lot more dissolved things. So there's a higher concentration of water outside than inside. So water is going to diffuse in. To go against the gradient of water rushing in, we're going to need energy. So that's the reason why you know or should know that this is active transport. And we've had this question before. Active transport is when you need ATP to go against the concentration gradient. Because they say paramecium lives in fresh water, there's a lot more percentage of water inside. There's a lot more stuff dissolved in the living organism inside the intracellular, okay, environment. So therefore, water does rush in. And to go against this gradient of water rush in, you need ATP to go the opposite way, which is active transport. And active transport, 81 is 3. On to 82. 82, the student predicted that the contractile vacuole, which we found out was actively transporting water out of the cell. Okay, why? Because there was more stuff in the cell than out. Therefore, there's more percentage of water. So we're going against the gradient. Okay, we'll contract fewer times, therefore pushing out less water per minute in a solution that it sits in that has a higher concentration of salt. So if we've got a higher concentration of salt, that means the percent of water is decreased. If there's a percent of water decreased, then less water rushes in, right? Water rushes in when you go from high percent of water to low percent water. It's osmosis. So if this percentage of water drops, less water is going to rush in and less water needs to be relieved. So therefore, this is correct because water would be moving out of the cell into the salt solution or less comes in, right? If I make the salt solution large enough, okay, now water is going to leave passively. It doesn't need the contractile vacuole. Why? Because now inside the cell, there'll be a greater percentage of water. Okay, so in a salt solution, okay, salt water is dangerous for us to drink because cells in a what we call hypertonic solution, okay, water is going to rush in passively to try to dilute that. So that's going to happen without the contractile vacuole if the percent of salt solution increases. And that's why 82 is 4. Okay, so on to 83. Number 83, state one reason why an individual's pulse rate increases during exercise. And this is the exercise pulse rate state lab you did. Okay, so why does the pulse rate increase during exercise? So I wrote, more oxygen is needed to be delivered to the muscles, right? Cellular respiration, we need more energy to move, so therefore we gotta, what, circulate more oxygen. And so that was fine. And you could clearly say other things. Muscle cells use more oxygen, more nutrients are used when muscle cells are more active, help maintain homeostasis. I guess if you have to guess, you write that. A faster pulse rate remove waste more rapidly, and a whole bunch of other things that make sense why you need to pump more blood quicker during exercise. Okay, on to 84. So 84, calculate the average pulse rate before exercise. So all we're going to do is add them up and divide. So you take your handy dandy calculator, okay, and we just add them up, and let's go do that. And so I take 68 plus 70 plus 54 plus 64 plus 75, and that's 331. Add them together, straight average, and divide by how many I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different individuals. So divide by 5, and I get 66.2. They said to the nearest tenth. Well, that's kind of nice. It comes out to the nearest tenth, right? This is the tenth place. So 66.2. That's it. On to 85 and our last question of this Yahoo test. So 85 statewide individuals in this group have different pulse rates before exercise. Well, different people have different level of fitness. So I wrote, some people may be in better shape. Okay, you could also write, some may take medication. There's individual variations. They were less active before exercise, different activities they did before pulse was taken. Again, it was a whole range of questions or answers you could add that are logical that answer this, okay? So I hope this helped, and you saw that there's so many types of questions that repeat in this test and other tests. The key is to take more tests. And the same type of concepts are done continuously over and over. And I hope you went to not just understand the answer, but understand the concept behind it. Again, I hope this helped. Good luck.